Anybody see us?
Are we live?
Says we're live.
Yeah, I can see it.
Hey.
Have to turn my sound down. Have to turn off that sound. I'm nervous. Sorry guys, just a second. We're adjusting
So we
the
have
equipment.
3 minutes until we actually go live. So this is just getting set up. VW Bus Guy, all the way from Australia. Can you hear me okay? Well, we're buffering already? Well, we're buffering on here.
Yeah. We are. But
Okay. Is the volume okay, guys? I'm going to turn that off.
Yeah, so the volume is okay. So
Okay.
you see, I told you we're not going to have any troubles.
You have to speak up.
I have to speak up? I'm afraid of the camera. Now, should I keep my glasses on all the time so I can read all the comments?
Well, that's why I have my laptop here, so
Yeah,
I figure I can
said
always
they
go
need
back.
more volume, you see?
Unfortunately, that's all the volume we're going to be able to get. I'll tell you what happened as far as that's concerned in a second. So,
Some people
yeah,
are saying
turn your volumes up on your computers if you can, because I'm maxed out on volume on this side. I'm just going to turn the notifications off on my phone. So, John Puckett, stop texting me about Tr3 questions. Okay.
Okay, so I think we're good to go. The comments are going really fast though. I'm not able to pick up everything, you know?
Okay. So I think we can go ahead and start. I'm not sure how many people we have in here. You're going to see me sort of glancing off to the left-hand side here because I've got my laptop here and I'm going to be able to scroll back and forth as far as the comments are concerned because I'm sure they're going to fly by me. And so I'll be able to go back and hopefully answer your questions if you have any, or comments, or just just tell me about your projects. And if you have any questions, obviously I can answer them. If I can't answer them, perhaps Elin can answer them. Obviously, he's going to be more of a Spitfire expert and GT6 expert than I am, since I can't fit in a GT6 or Spitfire. I don't have one.
Oh,
well, I can fit in, I just can't get out. So
you did fit in mine.
I did. So anyway, thanks for everybody for joining. I was going to do a really quick introduction for the people that are on. So myself, my name is Dave Tushingham. You're obviously on my channel, it's Chef Tush. So I'm a corporate executive chef by trade. A lot of people ask me that question, what I do for a living. So I restore cars as a hobby. So this is not my profession, so I'm just a hobbyist. I'm on my 4th restoration on TRs specifically, but I've done a lot of other little projects, whether it be motorcycle projects or helping other people on their projects. I first started out, I think, doing old Mopars. I think the first project I worked on was a 68 Super Bee. So I've been doing this for a little while. As far as Triumph ownership is concerned, I've owned, I think I've owned my first TR6 when I was about 23 years old. So I don't know, 30 something years ago now. I'm not very good at math. So anyway, so that's how I got my introduction into TRs, and sort of a typical story. Sold that car in order to buy my first house. So I said to myself once I sold that TR6 that I was going to have another one day. And it took me until I was 40 to be able to get that. So I've had my other TR6 for 13 years. If you can do the math there, you'll know how old I am. So, so that's a little bit about me. Today, I can generally talk about any of my projects that you want to talk about. Some of you have seen on my channel. So I've got 2 TR3s, actually technically 3 TR3s. I've got one that's a half of a car. So I've got 2 1960 TR3s. I've got a 59 TR3. I've got a 62 TR4, a 68 TR250, a 73 TR6, an 81 TR8. And if you want to throw an Alfa Romeo question in there, I've got an Alfa Romeo Spider and 81. So those are the vehicles that I have, as well as a couple bikes that we're not going to talk about today. Give me some history.
So hi guys, it's Elin Yakov here. My name is Elin Yakov, and I have my own channel. The It's called Elin Yakov's Rusty Beauties, and I guess many of you know about that, but there are some of Chef Tush subscribers that don't comment on my channel, so this means that they are not there too. So that's why I'm introducing myself, and yeah. So I'm originally from Bulgaria, came to live in Canada in 2012, so that's like 8 years now. And my car history, I'm not really a car guy. I actually had a career in Bulgaria in the jeans industry. I was producing jeans for many actually big brands in Europe, but I abandoned that and I came in Canada and I started actually building limousines here. So that's what I do for a living now in Canada. I build limousines, and again, like Chef Tush, restoring cars is my hobby, it's not my job. It's becoming a little bit my job because in the limousine shop now we are taking a little bit of triumphs whenever we are not busy, but our main thing is limousines. Uh, how did I get into triumphs? I got, when I started first working into the limousine shop, there was this Tr4 sitting there, a yellow one, fantastic. That was, it belonged to Jake, the owner of the shop, and I uh, had the chance to work a little bit on it. He asked me to do a little bit interior work on it, and then I loved it. And he let me take it to the British Car Day. Actually, the first year I attended British Car Day was with the Tr4, and then I just loved it. And I started looking for a project, and sure enough, soon I found my first Spitfire, and I got that. And from there it just started snowballing. I got another Spitfire, then I got my GT6, which was donated by Keith Edgington. I didn't buy it. And in the meantime, with Jake, we bought two TR6s. Now, recently we bought a TR3 that is waiting on the line. And we have also customers' cars in the shop. So I'm basically working on, I don't know how many trials now.
So essentially, he's a very bad influence on me. So, you know, he doesn't ever say to me, don't buy anything else, you've got enough, you know. He's not that kind of guy. He's always saying, you know, look what I found on, you know, Craigslist or Kijiji, and, you know, forcing me to go look at stuff.
Oh, yeah.
So, he's the problem.
Yeah, definitely.
Anyway, I guess I can start looking through some of the questions here, and I'll try to scroll back to the beginning, and I'll start with a comment by Kevin Moore. Kevin's mentioning that I'm a big guy, and yes, I'm a big guy. For those of you who've met me in person, you know I'm a little on the hefty side, let's say. So I do fit in a TR6 pretty well with some alterations. The biggest one being that I've moved down to a 13-inch wheel versus the stock 15-inch or 14.5-inch wheel. So moving down to the 13-inch gives me enough room to get in the car. And of course, I've got the seats all the way back as far as they'll go. And when I say that is actually there's a sort of a method you can do to push the rollers and the tracks back a little bit, so you can actually move the seat back so it actually contacts the wheel well, so the seat won't go back any further. So I've got the seat back as far as it'll go, and I've got the smaller steering wheel, and I have absolutely no issues getting in and out of a TR6 with it, no problem really. The only thing that I find tight on a TR6 is the center console on my leg, particularly on long trips. And I've taken this car, you know, last year I mentioned that we went to St. Louis last year in this car. The previous years I've been as far as Tennessee in this car. I've been in New Jersey, Ohio. I've pretty much driven my TR6 everywhere. And the only thing that hurts me on my TR6 after a long drive is my accelerator to leg, let's say. It sort of contacts the little H frame in the center of the car from my foot being stuck on the pedal for that length of time, and my sort of leg falls asleep after a period of time. Some of you guys may know that I have a little story about on the way back from Tennessee, for example, I needed a little bit of cruise control help, so I whittled an accelerator stick, so like a little forked stick, and I used to, of course, on the straightaway, I shouldn't be saying this, never do this, people, but on the straightaways, I'd put the stick down there and just lift my foot off just for a few seconds, just to be able to move my foot around, to be able to get some blood back into my foot, into my leg, and to, you know, ease the cramps. So I've upgraded from that stick now, and a couple of guys know this story as well, from Six Pack in particular, that I've relayed the stick. Instead of the stick now, I've upgraded to a telescoping bath sponge. So it's got a little triangular sponge on the end of it, and it telescopes. So it's compact for when you're traveling, and then you can telescope it out and just sort of hold it down there. And it's not like I'm jamming it in the seat or anything like that, but I can just hold it down there and just wiggle my foot a little bit. So in relation to the TR3, I actually find that there's more room in the TR3 than there is the TR6, primarily because the TR3 doesn't have a center console or a center H-frame. And I'm able to sort of spread my leg out a little bit more. So there's actually, I find, more room in the TR3A than a TR6. Now, having said that, I've never actually driven the TR3A with the windscreens on, or not windscreens, the side screens. That might be a little bit more difficult. Although with the sliding window, you can always sort of stick your elbow out the side and it'll get a little wet, but it'll give you a little bit more comfortable. So there's my answer to the space in TR6 versus TR3. All right, scrolling right along here.
Somebody was asking about how do we keep up with all these projects. I lost the question.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, okay. Chris Simo, he says my TR2 project is stalled. Nothing over my head, just lost momentum. How do you guys continue to press stuff? Well, that's a really tricky question because even though it looks like we press stuff, sometimes we lose momentum too. And personally, I lost almost a year with my projects, because I have 3 cars of my own, and I haven't worked on one for almost 2 years now. The projects that I work on are the ones that we bought with Jake together, so they're show projects, and I work during the day when actually I'm at work. But I used to be working after hours and in the weekends and stuff, and it was just way too much, and there were changes in my life. I got separated with my wife, and I moved on, so now I have my son every other week with me, so I have to take care of him. So I lost momentum too. So don't think that we are pressing very, very tough. Actually, it's not.
So I have kind of a follow-up answer to that. So yeah, we all take time off projects. We all get sort of fed up for a period of time. But if you notice, a lot of the times I'm out in the garage doing what I call a power hour. So those power hours really add up in the end. So if you can get out in the garage just for an hour, even 45 minutes a night, it's at least making progress on your project. The second thing I try to do is I try not to get too big of an overview of the project. I try to break it down into smaller projects so you can see your successes more. So for example, I'll concentrate on working on the door and finish that. And when you finish that, it gives you sort of some inspiration to move on further. And to be honest with you, and Elin will probably say the same, by doing YouTube videos and people commenting, it actually encourages you. Sometimes it can discourage you, depending on if you get negative comments. And we get a few each, but we try not to let it discourage us. And usually the positive comments are enough to get us to continue on. Sometimes when you're feeling a little bit down, you just have to look at the comments, and you see some comments. Well, you inspired me to get my TR6 out of the garage that's been in the back for 25 years, etc. People run into it at shows. So those kind of things are actually helpful from a YouTube creator perspective. So those are good. So that's some advice to you.
Yeah.
So Kevin Bloom, how you doing, Kevin? Kevin's working on a TR250 at the moment as well. He's got a couple of beautiful TR6s. Flash times between coats of both primer, base coat, and clear coat. And really, it's a difficult question to answer. The first thing I'm going to say is, and I had a Zoom meeting a few weeks ago or a week ago or whatever, and I mentioned the most important thing I think is to actually read and understand your tech sheets for your products. So all products are going to be different, and there's going to be a ton of variables not only in the products but also in the temperature and humidity that you're painting in. So really you have to look at that. So for reducers, for example, there are slow, fast, and medium reducers based on the temperature that you're spraying. And this will allow your base coat to flow out, to flash off at the appropriate time. So you really need to look at your tech sheets for your products to be able to figure out what your flash times are going to be and what your recoats are, what your recoat windows are, anything to do with the actual products. For example, some epoxy primers require an induction time. You have to wait for your primer to sit for 30 minutes before you use it. The one I'm currently using doesn't have an induction time. You can just mix it and spray. So all products are different, so that's my advice, is to read the tech sheets. And those are generally downloadable online. All right. Let's go to the next question. Shim procedure for replacing the bearings and seals on the rear end of the TR3.
You lost me there.
Yeah, so that's not okay. So I'm not sure if you're talking about the axle shims, and I'll answer this. So there are shims behind the brake back plate on the TR3, and these actually shim the axles out from the crown. And actually, I had to do this on my 1960 because I hadn't shimmed them out enough, and I could feel the axle binding actually when I moved the car.
Mm-hmm.
So there's in the manual there are specs as far as the shims that are concerned. You should always record the shims that you take out, but there are I can't remember what the actual setting is for the end float, but you need to follow the manual, and you know the more shims you have to be able to adjust that, the better. And you need to kind of make sure that the shims on each side are relatively the same thickness. All right, so that's hopefully answered that question there. VW Bus Guy always got a TR10 question, which we don't see many TR10s over here. I think I saw a couple at the International Auto Show. What are your thoughts on Msd Ignition? My distributor must be getting moisture. It's a bear to start. So I have no experience with Msd Ignition. I have more experience with Petronix. I use Petronix electronic ignition in all my cars. So I'm not an MSD guy, so I won't be able to really help you out from that perspective. Like I said, I am running Petronix, but not having used anything else other than Petronix. So hopefully I won't be able to help you out more there. And again, if anybody's watching this and has an answer for a specific guy on here, like VW Bus Guy, if anybody has any experience, just throw it in the chat there, and you can follow along in the chat, so we can all help each other out. If I or Elin can't answer it, perhaps you guys can that are watching. All right.
Ralph Kapp asking, what's the beer of my choice? It's the cold beer. As long as it's cold, I don't care what it is. It's beer. It needs to be cold. And he also asks if we're still under quarantine. Yeah, the shop that I work in is still closed, so I go there and I work on my Triumphs, but the shop is closed. So that's, I guess, the official response to that. Just in Canada generally now everything is reopening. They just opened restaurants. I was telling Chef Tush that as I was coming here, I passed on the main street of the town. The restaurants are open. There are tables on the sidewalks, and people are just sitting close to each other. There's no social distancing anymore. Technical questions, please.
Okay, so I got a question here from Robert in Florida. Hey, Robert, how you doing? So he's asking about, based on your experience, when someone's looking for a TR6, what are the weak points to look for? So I'll go over a couple of them. Obviously, the first thing to look for in a TR6 is the condition of the frame, and in particular, the T-shirt section, as you know, and the rear trailing arms are a real suspect. There are weak points on the TR6, so those are the first thing you look for is a sound frame. I basically say that everything is fixable if you've got a good platform to work on. So that's the first thing I really look at is the frame underneath the car. The second thing that you probably really want to check, obviously, if you have a TR6, you know about the thrust washer issues. So you always want to do thrust washer check, by levering the crank back and forward to see if you've got a lot of crankshaft in play. So those are the two, I think, critical things. Everything else in my mind can be fixed, obviously. So it's really price dependent on what you're looking at. So, if you're looking at a project that's a reasonable price point, but it's got a lot of, needs a repaint, or it's got some body damage, etc., all that stuff can be fixed. It's just cosmetic. So really what you're looking for is, from my perspective, is obviously to have a good foundation to work on first. And obviously, if you don't want to get into a major expense right off the bat, look into the condition of the engine, the thrust washers, do a compression check, etc. Check for rust. Generally, these cars rust pretty badly. You can see a lot of rust usually around the headlight buckets in the front, along the seams along the rear fenders, that kind of thing. You'll see, these cars rust generally in the same spots if they've been exposed to, some conditions. And obviously, I've purchased a few Canadian cars that really rust from, these cars were driven in the winter here. We salt the roads up here. I should have mentioned that actually, that some guys don't know where we're from. So we live in Newmarket, Ontario, which is just north of Toronto, obviously in Canada. So that's where we're from. So salt on the roads here, and these cars were driven in the wintertime. And a lot of times the cars I've seen, and my TR250 is a perfect example, the bottom third of the car, I think, is basically gone and been brazed and patched over the years. And these cars, remember, had no value to them, so people were just, not repairing them, just repairing them enough to keep them on the road. Now they've got some value, so you've got to sort of go back in and fix all that work that's been done previously. So hopefully that answers your question, Robert. Oh, and there's a two-part. And somebody else has also asked about Les, and Elin and I were talking to see if Les was going to crash the chat here. And Les might be actually watching. So a couple of people asking about Les and how he's doing. I don't have too much of an update from Les. Les takes his, let's say this politically correct, Les takes his time with projects. So I think the last video I did with Les, he was working on the suspension. I took the first two sets of suspension, front suspension, and I left Les with the other two to do, and the other two are still there on his bench untouched. Having said that, so Les also had taken his frame, the best of the two frames that he had up to the sandblasters, and he had his frame sandblasted, and it came back. And really there wasn't anything that we didn't expect as far as rust issues were concerned. Now, in the last week, another frame has actually come up on our local Kijiji, which is like a Craigslist. And this frame has been totally repaired and painted. So Les has actually gone out and bought this frame. So now Les has three frames. So he's got one frame now that's completely done, painted, and repaired, with the exception of the differential mounts. And this kind of goes back to your question as well, Robert. Another weak point on these cars are the diff mounts. As you know, they can crack. So a lot of guys will box those in. So I'd suggest anybody who's got a TR6 differential out, they should probably box their diff mounts in. So Les's frame needs the diff mounts boxed in, but other than that, it's ready to go. So hopefully we'll see some progression from Les's project, and he'll actually disassemble that front suspension. And the hope was to disassemble it, clean it, rebush it, whatever, and get it back on the car. You just have a bare frame there. You can just do that and build the frame up. So hopefully we'll see more involvement from Les. He's a character for sure. As I mentioned, Les is unfiltered, so sometimes it's not the best idea to have him on a live video. And if he's watching, he's probably going to be mad at me for saying that. But anyway, all right. So Kevin again with a MIG welding setting question. And again, Kevin, it's a kind of a generic question. So I have a Lincoln Easy MIG 140 running a gas bottle, and you're looking at 20 gauge metal. Usually I use 18 gauge, which seems to be what matches up on these cars. So with 18 gauge metal, and again, it depends on if you're welding solid metal to solid metal. In some cases, you've got a rusty, a little bit thinner piece of metal that you're welding to. On my machine, I'm usually welding on voltage setting B, so I don't have a digital dial on mine, so I can't tell you exactly what the settings, but usually my wire speed's about 3.5, and my voltage is on. If I've got good metal, I will crank it up to C. If I've got, suspect metal on one side of it and new metal on the other side, I'll generally drop it down to to B, second highest setting. So the second lowest setting. I think mine goes up to D on the settings. So hopefully that answers your question. I know again it's a tough question to answer because all welders are different as well. But yeah, it's not a. My little welder will do everything that I need it to do. So I've been quite happy with the little Lincoln 140. So you already answered Ralph's quarantine question, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
We're still there. Oh my God, there's so many questions, guys. I'm not sure we're gonna be able to respond to everything.
Somebody asked a question about ethanol, and somebody else says the enemy SU-37 has already kind of answered that question. Shell 91 is the only gas here in Ontario that does not contain ethanol. There are websites out there that show you actually gas stations that don't contain ethanol. I know when we travel in the States, and if Skip is watching, Skip generally, Skip is a T50, TR6, Spitfire, TR4 owner in the States who I travel with quite frequently to events. When Skip does his routings, he'll actually go on the website and he'll look for gas stations along the way that are ethanol free. So hopefully that answers your question. What's Chris say? I do love these cars and solving problems I create. I built a super motor for my Tier 6 and first drive ripped the diff from the carrier. What's the worst thing that's happened to you guys? The worst thing that happened to me on my TR6, and it was, again, and you guys probably have similar stories. It was a very, very simple job. I was actually cleaning the screen out of my TR6 overdrive transmission. So there's two screens. There's a screen along the bottom. It's a magnetic screen along the flat plate on the bottom. And then there's another internal screen that's got a threaded plug. So I was doing the internal screen and I actually stripped the plug and I could not get it back in the transmission. So the tap size, if you can imagine, this plug is quite big. So I ended up having to order a tap to actually re-tap that to get that plug in, and that kept my car down, I think, for a period of about 3 or 4 weeks. And that was probably the worst thing to ever happen. It's such an easy process, and if you just cross-thread the cap, you know, aluminum casing, and that was really, really a nightmare for me to fix. So that was probably my biggest faux pas on working on these cars.
And for me, it was actually the first drive of the car, of the Spitfire, that I restored, because I was very smart and I decided that I was not going to look at the engine when I restored the car. And my goal was to take it to a British Car Day. So the night before, or 2 nights before British Car Day, was my first drive of the car with just painted engine. I didn't even take it apart to see what was if everything was okay with it. So I decided to take it on a test drive from the shop to home, which is like 20 kilometers, and I blew the head gasket at night. And then the day after, I managed with my friend Carlos at the time, we managed to actually replace the head gasket, and I took the car to the British Car Day, but then after that I took that engine off and I installed another engine that I rebuilt properly. So that was the worst thing that happened to me, that I blew the head gasket. Actually, a funny story with the wire wheels initially on the Spitfire. I once had to hit the brakes so hard because there was somebody stopping in front of me on a red light, yellow light actually, that we could have passed, but they decided to stop, so I had to stop. And the splines on my wire wheels, the front ones, just made this noise, and the car kept going. So I stopped barely, like just behind the guy. And then I said, okay, that's enough, and I took the wire wheels off.
Was it the splines that it stripped?
Yeah.
Okay. So back to the questions. I see Keith Norrie, and Keith, how you doing? Keith's got a beautiful TR6, pretty highly modded, and I think it's white as well. White is the best color for TR6s, as you know. Keith says, don't forget about the hubs on the TR6s, and yeah, I was wrong to not mention them. Hubs are critical on these cars, and obviously they're pretty old, and if the bearings go bad, you know, and you have, you know, cracks in your axles, you can end up in a cornfield or worse. And if you watch some of my videos, I actually suggest either to get them professionally rebuilt. I don't do them personally, but either to get them professionally rebuilt or go to an upgraded unit. Good Parts, for example, has an awesome upgraded hub. You can get it with CV joints. You can get it with a heavy-duty axle if you want. You can mate that to a Nissan R200 differential if you wanted to. So yeah, hubs are critical on these cars because you don't want to have you know, a hub that's growling and just continue driving it, because you will lose a wheel at some point, and that's pretty dangerous, obviously. Let's see here. Did I convert my Tr3 to rack and pinion steering? If so, whether I change it to have to make to fit it in. Okay, so yes, I did. On my 1960, I did do the rack and pinion conversion, and I've got absolutely no regrets. My 59, I still have the traditional worm and peg setup in there. So I bought the bolt-in kit from Moss, which I think is the Bastuck kit, if I'm not mistaken. And honestly, it is truly a bolt-in kit. You basically remove the old components, and this new rack just bolts right in. I believe the tie rod ends are from either a TR7 or a Mini. Don't quote me on that, but I know they're another British car. So really, the Moss steering rack conversion, although it's pretty pricey, it actually was a really, really easy install. Now, of course, when you do a rack conversion on a TR3, then you need to be concerned about losing your trafficator, so your turn signals in your steering wheel, as well as your horn. So what I've done for that is I've actually fitted, and there's a number of different ways you can do it. You can get a slip ring for your steering shaft if you wanted to, but what I've done is I used a part from I don't know if I want to say this. I used a part from an MGA.
Oh my God!
I used there's a MGA. Yeah, I think Jaguar. Jaguar sounds better.
Okay.
I think it was probably from an E-Type. Anyway, They have a vacuum assisted switch that I've got fitted on my dash, and I've just got a horn button there as well, and that works actually quite well. Hopefully that answers your question. Developed a knock rattle under load above 2,500 RPM, which disappears when I take it off the pedal. Timing? I don't know. Under load? Timing? It could be pinging.
Normally the timing is rattling when there's no load. Under load.
He says knock rattle under load.
I don't know.
Above 2,500 RPM, which disappears when I take it up. So it could be timing related issues. So that's probably something I would check into first. But yeah, it could be a lot of things. That's pretty hard to diagnose without hearing it. Sometimes what I do, and I don't know if this would help you in this case, is if I'm trying to diagnose whether it's like a drivetrain noise, I'll actually go to a parking lot and I'll drive the car and I'll actually shut it off, and I'll see if I can hear anything when I shut the car off, just when I'm coasting. I don't know if that would help, but that's what I do sometimes. It says timing chain is silent at low PRM, and ignition jumps around, the engine revs up. Yeah, that's a tough question. Okay, Adam Mann, embarrassed to ask this, but when you're engaging, disengaging, overdrive, do you need to depress the clutch? No, you don't. Basically, what I do when I'm engaging and disengaging is I generally let off the gas a touch. I don't, keep hammering and then switch it up. I actually will just let off a tiny bit, switch it on, and then should kick in pretty quickly. I find my A-type overdrive kicks in a little bit quicker than my J-type, but that just could be the setup. So, but that's my suggestion is, no, you don't need to, you don't need to clutch it. I know some people that do, but you don't need to. Okay, let's keep, Scotch and Coke? No, just straight Diet Coke. Sorry, guys. Okay, Ralph's got a question. Elin, what do you think the cost of painting your new TR6 project that you will be working on?
Well, it depends, because how we're going to do that, the whole idea for this project is that we're going to prepare it as much as we can inside the, what should we call it, the engine bay, the interior of the car, under the car, and everything we're going to do in the shop, and it's going to go out assembled as one piece, which Chef Tush doesn't like. He will spray his panel separately, his doors and everything, but we're going to send the car out as one piece, and everything inside the car is going to be painted and ready. So also we're not going to do any body work on the outside. They're going to do it in the shop. So I'm assuming that's going to be about, I don't know, 4,500 Canadian, which is what, like 3,000 American?
Yeah.
I
think it's like $50 American, something like that.
Yeah. Recently, yeah. So I think, yeah, that's where what our goal is, but maybe it's going to be cheaper, maybe it's going to be more expensive. I don't know. Depends on the paint shop. And
okay, I'm going to go back a little bit. I know it's kind of hard for me to follow along. John, I just saw you missed my question, so I'll go back and look at your question. Did I retain the original voltage regulator on the Tr3 because I saw a company that strips and rebuilds it? So on my Tr3, I have an alternator conversion, and yes, I have a stripped out regulator box, and it's just basically you got a shunt in there. So I'm not sure if you're going to be running your generator still on your car, but or you're going to an alternator conversion. But yes, you can either modify that. There are guys that do electronic conversions as well. So yes, they are on the market out there. So my car might be a little different because I'm doing the alternator conversion, but yes, I do have it stripped out. It's still there on the firewall, but if you actually pop the cap off, there's just a shunt inside. Robert, again, what do I suggest is the best undercoating product for the wheel wells and floorboards? So undercoating, I suggest, and what I've used in the past, I've used a couple different products. I really like the Raptor Liner product. So it's made by U-Pole. It's a two-part product. It's tintable if you want to make it body color. I particularly like the black look in the wheel wells, so I will actually do the body tub on the inner fenders and the outer fenders with the Raptor Liner. And in some cases, actually this TR250, I actually did the whole underside of the car. That's the first car I've actually done the whole underside of the car. Anyway, it's a good product. It holds up really well. As far as the interior of the car, I don't know if you're talking about sound deadening. So a lot of guys will use different products, whether it's Dynamat or Fat Mat, for example. I use Fat Mat in my car, which is kind of an asphalt sticky stuff. Fat Mat was, I think, just a little cheaper alternative than Dynamat. I think Eastwood has a product out there as well. So you can use that. I have seen sprayable coatings, something like lizard skin. So you can look into that if you're interested in doing a sprayable coating, which is supposed to be like an acoustic, like a noise reduction, and also a heat reduction. I've never used the product, but I know there are products out there like that. Okay, let's move on here. I had a gentleman ask me about my roll bar in my TR6, and he wanted to know where I got my roll bar from. And a lot of the guys here that are watching from Six Pack will know this gentleman. So in the Six Pack forum that I belong to, there was a gentleman from Quebec whose name was The Guy from Quebec, was his handle on the channel. His name was Francois Fauché. And he actually did a production run of, I think, about 20 of these bars. If you've seen a picture of my car, you can probably see it. You saw it on the intro to this video. It's the double hoop style roll bar, which I quite like, actually. It's not frame connected, but it is plated on the bottom of the body tub. So that's where I got that from. And unfortunately, he's, I think, sold his TR6 and is long out of the TR6 parts business. I actually have some of the other parts on my car. I've got some water jetted sills that say 73 TR6. I've got stainless steel fuel lines from him. He did a really nice emergency bonnet release and a few other kind of parts. Oh, he also used to do the rad shrouds as well before Good Parts really got into it. So yeah, I miss him. He had some very good quality parts. So that's where I got the roll bar for him, and unfortunately he doesn't make them anymore. Anyway, okay. Robert, front hubs from Good Parts. He's got the Wilwood upgrade front brake kit. I've seen the Wilwood kits on one of the guys, the local guys had it on a TR250. It's a really, really nice setup. You had a brake biasing valve built into it. It was really, really nice to see. VW Bus Guy, if I was looking for parts, where would be a good site to use? So again, I'm not sure if you're talking specific like TR10 parts, I wouldn't be familiar with. But if you're looking for any Triumph, TR6, you know, Spitfire, GT6, there are certain sites I think that are more generated towards, obviously TR8s, for example, would be somebody like the Wedge Shop. Something like Spitbits or somebody would be for like a Spitfire. For a TR6 or for a TR250, TR4, I generally use what they call the big three, but I don't stay within the big three. So Victoria British, I don't order a ton of parts from, primarily because their shipping costs seem to be really high, and their high brokerage fees into Canada. So Roadster Factory, Moss Motors, British Parts Northwest I order quite a bit from. And then there are the smaller vendors that we talked about. So Good Parts, I mean, I really like Good Parts parts. They're very high quality. I wonder who that is. That's not a TR6. Anyway, so they have very good quality parts. Somebody like TSI, so Ted Schumacher also has a good website. So I would suggest that if you're looking for any sort of performance-related or performance-oriented parts, Good Parts is a great site to look at if you're looking for aftermarket type stuff. But if you're looking for like regular type OEM style stuff, then those other vendors that I'd mentioned, Rimmers in the UK as well. There's TR Bits. There's if you're looking for more race parts, again, Racetorations in the UK is a site that I quite looking at. Again, fairly expensive stuff, but some really cool stuff. So yeah, there's tons of websites out there that you can look for parts. And what I generally try to do is I don't really use one source for parts. I really look for sales. I look for what's on sale. So I know what I need during a restoration. So generally what I'll do is I'll take advantage of the sales and I'll stockpile parts. And I'm fortunate that I can use my living room to do that. People laugh when they come over and I've got, you know, boxes of rims for end tables on the side of my couch. But I stockpile my parts, so I really, really hate when I'm doing a restoration when I don't have a part to work with and I have to wait for it to come. So I'd suggest if you're doing a project, make a list and check it twice. I use some guys use spreadsheets. I know John's on here. He just showed me his TR3 spreadsheet. It's pretty good. I actually use, for my TR6 or 250 restoration, I actually use the Roadster Factory glove box companion. And I actually go through and I just check mark what I've purchased. That seems to work really well for a TR6 or TR250 restoration. Okay, yes, I don't have a missus. That's why I can store parts in the dining room. Elin, are you planning to squeeze any more horsepower out of your spit?
No, I don't think so. I'm not a fan of like muscle cars, and I drive my Spitfire every day almost, but I drive it just for fun. I cruise. I don't need any more power in my Spitfire. I'm thinking a little bit about the next Spitfire that I'm gonna work on. Eventually, I don't know when the time is gonna come, but I'm gonna install a GT6 engine in it. Maybe there I'm gonna do a little bit, some upgrades just for fun, but not that I need the power. I'm not a fan of racing and stuff like that. I just cruise with my cars. I love cruising.
Okay, Kevin asked if I've considered installing air conditioning in my 250. Absolutely not. I don't even have a radio in my car, so air
Yeah.
conditioning is kind of over the top for me. The TR250 is going to have a Surrey top, as you know, so that'll be a new and exciting thing. I understand that the Surreys can be kind of warm to drive in, so I'm looking forward to trying it out and seeing what it's like not having air conditioning in the 250. So if I ever needed air conditioning, I'd probably just get a Miata.
Yeah, if I ever need an air conditioning, I'm
Ah,
gonna just drive my Ford.
yeah.
These are the
Uh,
cars that you enjoy. You don't need air conditioning there.
Mark, TR6 clutch is very heavy in traffic. Is there a power assisted clutch available? I don't think there's a power assisted clutch, but there is a hydraulic clutch option, a hydraulic throwout bearing. I think Good Parts offers it, which is supposed to be better. Um, so you might take a look at Good Parts. Um, so again, they have I think it's an exterior line that runs out of the bell housing, so you may have to drill a line out through your bell housing. So have a look at that. That might help you out. Okay. Which bolts to reuse and which ones need to be replaced? So, good question. Generally, what I do, um, it depends on what restoration I'm going for. So let's talk about my TR6. So, um, obviously, there are parts where you want to use uh, stainless steel. I'm kind of a fan of stainless steel, but you can't use stainless steel everywhere. When there are high torque ratings on something like suspension, you're not obviously going to want to use stainless steel. So in that case, generally what I'll do is I will actually, when I take my cars apart, I label everything in a baggie. And what I'll generally do is I'll clean up all my hardware, whether it's by wire brushing it, whether it's by tumbling it in media, whether it's putting it in my blasting cabinet and blasting it. That's what I'll do. Obviously, new nylock nuts, obviously new lock washers. I tend to sometimes use just regular nuts over, although I've got a pretty good stockpile of fasteners that I keep in stock, whether it's nylock or regular nuts, for my project. So yeah, I tend to reuse what I can for the most part. There are some places where you may choose to upgrade. I'm thinking like head bolts, for example. I'm thinking about ARP fasteners in the engine, that kind of thing that you may decide to upgrade. But for the most part, I just usually go with the stock bolts. Or in some cases where there's a non-stress or non-high torque value application, I like going with stainless steel. My back carburetor is way too rich because going off the back carburetor was lean. I adjusted the needle valve, took it for a drive, and started backfiring out the carb, and the back plugs are black. What kind of car is this, Colton? I'm assuming it's a TR6. Can you give us more information? Okay. What is the level of difficulty in replacing the convertible top on a TR6? So this is a good question for Elin. Can a novice do it, or do you recommend having a professional do it? Any idea of cost?
It cost us.
So how difficult
Labor.
is it to replace the top, first of all? And second of all, cost?
Labor cost? Well, labor cost, it depends on which country you are, but I installed only one, and it took me, I think, about a day and a half because I didn't know what I was doing. So I was basically learning on the go. I'm assuming that if someone knows what they're doing, or if they have a little bit of experience, they can do it in like 8 hours. I would say average level of experience. You need some special tools though, like a tool for installing snap buttons, and you need a really good trim glue because the one that is in a can, I don't trust that glue, so you need some really nice glue that can stick.
Yeah, it's probably good to have a helper to help you stretch it. As and again, going back to cost, I'm not sure if you're talking about cost for tops or cost for installation. So obviously, from a top perspective, there are lots of different options as far as tops are concerned. You can get a very cheap top with no zip out rear window, no reflective stripes, all the way up to either a canvas or a mohair top, which are obviously very much more expensive. And in my mind, they're a little harder to install than the factory tops. Although I don't have much experience, but I know that the mohair tops are a little bit more of a challenge to install and to maintain, actually, I think. So hopefully that answers your question. Okay, so that was a carb-related question about it. Black plugs. So obviously, if you've adjusted the needle, I'm thinking it's a possibility that maybe your needle valve is sticking and you're getting too much fuel in your rear carb, and it's causing your plugs to be blacker. So I know these needle valves stick quite often, and that I've had happen on my car a few times. There could be just a little speck of dirt in there, so maybe you want to take the carbs off or the float bowls off and see if you can either change out their needle valve or clean the needle valve at least and see if that solves your issue. Okay. Saw a Radco frame put under a TR6, looks strong. Yeah, the Radco frames are really nice. It's probably about 13 years ago in Hershey, Pennsylvania, when we were doing one of the first trials. So the six-pack car club, we do the trials every year at a different location. So in Hershey, Pennsylvania that year, Tony, the owner of Radco, brought a trailer with a old TR6 frame on one side and a brand new Radco frame on the other side. And it was at that point, actually, I went home and I thought to myself, I have to get I hadn't thought about even taking the body off my TR6 at that point, but when I saw the stock TR6 frame, I knew that I needed to sort of take the car off, or take the body off and at least have a look at the frame. I wasn't really interested in going to the Radco frame option, but they are beautiful frames. Actually, Tony would even let you drive his car. He had a TR250. I think he called his TR250 Eleanor, if I'm not mistaken, but he had a TR250 that he'd even let you drive that had a Radco frame under it if you just wanted to feel what a Radco frame felt like. Now, having said that, they are absolutely beautiful frames, but I actually costed one out. Somebody said, why don't you get a Radco frame? I think it was for Les's project. And if you cost the Radco frame, I think I figured out it was going to be about $8,000 to get a Radco frame up to Canada. So being shipped, not being picked up, but being shipped. And that was without options. There are a bunch of different options you get on his frames, whether you want it powder coated, that's an extra charge, whether you want it foam filled, that's an extra charge, whether you want it modified for an R200 diff or Toyota Trans, that kind of thing. There's all sorts of things you can do to his frame that just adds up and adds up. So it's about $8,000, I think, for a Radco frame. So it's not really an economical solution, but they are really, really nice frames. What is the best liner to put in the horizontal channel of a door window to get tight and durable? So horizontal channel of a door window. So you're talking about, yeah, so I think you were talking about the window channel. So I think the common fix is the Velcro. So if you go to, well, first of all, you can actually buy new window channels. They actually just come from Moss Motive, for example. There is a channel that you can buy that you need to re-rivet. So you need to detach the rivets from your old channels and then re-rivet this new channel in. So that's one option. But the easier option in my mind is to reline them with Velcro, so the fuzzy side of Velcro. So if you go to somewhere like Home Depot or Lowe's, you can buy the long lengths of industrial Velcro and simply just reline the channels. So scrape out what's in there, clean everything out, and then you can just simply reline the channels with the Velcro. It works really well. I did that in my TR6. I'll be doing it in my 250, and I've never had any issues since I did that. So that's my recommendation for that. If you're looking for a tutorial on that, there's a gentleman by the name of Bob Danielson, goes by the handle of Bobby D. So Bob Danielson, TR6, if you Google it, Bob's got a great website with a bunch of tutorials on everything generally related to TR6s. So he documents his projects very well, and he's one of the first guys I saw that recommended doing the Velcro on the window channel. So check out Bob Danielson's site. If you're not that good with mechanical work, how would you check the transmission to make sure it's not in bad shape? I guess the only thing you could really do if you're not good mechanically is just to really pop the top off, and just first thing I do is a visual inspection and just make sure that none of the gears are chipped inside. So that's about pretty much all you can do if you're not mechanically oriented.
Just drive it and make sure it's not popping out of gear, because
Yeah,
that's a very common problem.
I think
when
in
it
John's
pops.
case, I don't think he has a drivable car. He's probably never driven his car to
Oh, yeah.
check, so that could be an issue. So yeah, if you don't have the ability to drive it, then it can be an issue. I know, for example, Elin has got a nice bench top testing rig for transmissions, and specifically overdrive transmissions. He's shown it in a couple of his videos. He's had my TR6 or TR250 transmission on his rig, so just checking the operation of the overdrive. So there is a way to test overdrives in, I guess, general transmission
Same way
operation.
you can check the transmission.
Yeah.
The thing is, there you use the output as an input, and
Yeah.
I don't know how well that would be for checking the actual transmission.
Yeah.
It works for the overdrive, but I don't know about the transmission.
Okay, what is the best liner to put? Oh, sorry, I already got that. Sorry. I'm stripping a TR6. What's the best way to take out the windscreen without breaking it? Oh, that's a good question. So the TR6 windscreen in my 73 TR6, it probably took me about 5 weeks to get it out.
Really?
Yeah, some of them are just a bear to get out. Some of them come out like no problem. So it really depends, I guess, on where the car came from. If it's a rusty car to begin with, some come out really easily. So a couple different things. And one thing is, you don't want to damage those brackets down there. Those brackets are not available. There's tons of parts available on the marketplace, but those windscreen retaining brackets on the inside of the body tub are not available. So try not to damage those if possible. Now, having said that, what worked for me, and this worked for me, obviously you want to spray penetrating oil like continuously for a number of days before you try to attempt to take it out. Make sure obviously all the fasteners are loose and the bottom nuts are off the windscreen frame. What worked for me in the end, you can try some heat for number one, but what worked for me was a blunt chisel tip, so blunted tip on a air hammer. And I just sort of buzzed it, and just buzzing it freed up the channels on both sides, so I could actually finally pull the windscreen out. Again, it's kind of a little difficult angle, so you kind of almost need to stand, if you're doing it yourself, which generally I do, you kind of need to stand in the center of the car and pull it up evenly, because if you start rocking it back and forth, it's not going to come out. There's just kind of a strange angle to it. You've got to sort of pull it out on that angle, otherwise it's going to bind. So blunt air hammer chisel. Didn't have any problem with breaking the glass. Didn't have any problems with damaging the brackets either. So that seemed to work for me.
I have a different answer to that.
Yep.
Like these brackets, they're held by 2 screws on the inside of the car, and there's 1 screw on the outside, right? So I just remove all these 3 screws completely.
And one nut on the bottom of the spindle.
Yeah, the spindle, of course. But the 3 that are holding the actual bracket to the body, I just remove them completely, and then I take what do you call a plumber's wrench.
Mm-hmm.
I grab the bracket and I just twist it left and right. And as you're wiggling it, it just releases, and then I actually take the bracket out. It cannot come out completely because it's hitting the bulkhead, but you can almost remove it from the windshield frame, and then the windshield frame comes out. And I actually showed that in the video that I removed it from the TR6, from the 74 TR6. Unfortunately, I can't add the link here, but I showed it in video. It worked like a charm. It takes 5 minutes to take out the windshield frame.
Okay, next question is, have I found a source for the line from the gas tank to the carbon canister? And I'm assuming this is a TR6 question, and the answer is no. It was a nylon line that ran basically, well, there's a metal line that runs along the frame, but then there's a nylon, so it goes from a nylon line to a metal line back to a nylon line that crosses across the frame at the front and up to the carbon canister. That nylon line I haven't been able to find, so what I just do is I just use a regular fuel line to run that across. Unfortunately, that's all I could find, so that's what I've used. So hopefully that answers your question. It's not obviously concourse, but it still works. My TR10 pops out of third gear. I just hold it in. Maybe you could get a bungee cord. You wouldn't have to hold it. Let's go back here and see if I'm missing anything. Keep more questions, guys. I think I'm caught up on the questions. If I haven't answered your questions, ask it again, because I'm sort of scrolling backwards to see if I've missed anything.
Okay, somebody wants to see the sign.
So these signs were from the Toronto International Auto Show. What was it, 2012? It says on it.
Yeah. No,
where we had the Toronto Tram Club was displaying a number of cars at the Toronto International Auto Show, and they had these huge signs all the way lining the pavilion. And I was fortunate at the time; I was president of the club, so I managed to grab. I think I probably got 5 or 6 of these. And my intent at one point was to they're quite long, and I was kind of at some point going to sort of line the walls of my garage with them, or a man cave or whatever. If David Fiddler is watching this video, David really got the cherry on top of the sundae, so to speak. There was this beautiful spinning banner that spun from the ceiling, and I wanted that, but I didn't manage to get the VP got that. So yeah, David Fiddler's probably got that spinning around in his garage on top of his Humber Super Snipe and his TR6s. So yeah, I regret not getting that. Maybe one day I'll sneak into his garage and grab it.
Yeah, we misunderstood that question about the windshield. It wasn't about the frame, it was about the windshield itself. Yeah.
Okay.
So there's nothing easier than that. You just grab a, what do you call it, exactor knife and cut the gasket.
So you're obviously not trying to keep the seal. So you're going to have to buy a new windscreen seal. So yeah, as Elin says.
Don't keep that seal, because I tried once, I installed the windshield, and then for whatever reason I had to take it out. They asked me to take it out again. And since the seal was new, I said, okay, I'm going to try to remove it without cutting the seal. And I snapped the glass. I just shattered the glass. That was the only glass I broke. I installed tens, and I don't know how many glass. I never broke one when I was installing them. I broke one when I was removing it. So don't try to save the seal. Just cut it off with exactor knife, and that's going to work.
Okay, David Plass. David's currently working on a GT6.
Yeah.
So he asked about motivation on how to start a huge project.
Well, my normal answer to that would be film it, but you're already filming it, David, so I don't know why you're losing motivation. Because like David said, when you're filming it, then you have the motivation to finish it, because people are gonna say, okay, he started and he never finished. Like Skip Gold is chasing me all the time for the second part of my transmission rebuilding video.
Yeah.
It's about a Ford anyways. So yeah, normally that's pretty good motivation. When you're filming it and you start something, you want to finish it, so you show to people that you don't give up easily. So David, that's my advice to you. Just stay on it.
Again, it's the same sort of response that I said before as well. Sometimes it's better to look at smaller picture versus bigger picture. Obviously, there's a will to want to restore the car, so you obviously have to have that, and you have to understand what it takes to restore a car, and you'll learn that as you go along. That's why there's so many failed restorations out there, because people just don't understand what it takes to restore a car. Obviously, from a skill level, although you can learn skills, you just have to want to be able to learn them. I couldn't weld when I first started working on cars, and I had to teach myself how to weld. I taught myself how to paint. So those are the kind of things you need to learn, but you have to have a will to be able to want to do that. So that's one thing. And again, like I said, break it down into more manageable parts, as opposed to looking big picture. That's what I find seems to work for me motivationally. If you're challenged by looking at this huge, pile of rust in front of you. And again, I got discouraged with this car. As soon as I had the body panels off this car and saw all the patches, it was, I had a timeline in mind for the car at that point. I was doing this T- countdown. And as soon as I saw what the body tub looked like, and that was just on the surface, everywhere we looked on this car, and Elin will tell you because he helped me reconstruct quite a few parts of this car. Everywhere I looked, it seemed like there was some, as I call it, can of worms, or kettle of worms, or whatever you want to call it. So everywhere we looked, there was some either poor repair, major rust, major holes, et cetera, and it just went on and on. So it can be easy to get discouraged, but obviously where there's a will, there's a way. Let's just say that.
And also, I would add to that, David, that you shouldn't aim at your first project, because I know that's your first project. You shouldn't aim at the perfect quality, and don't fall into this trap of checking into forums and listening to everybody's advice and everything. Just keep working on it, and you're gonna learn from your experience. Don't learn from everybody else, because people generally they can't explain. Even I, when I work on something, I can show you how to do it, but I can't explain it. So in forums, it's hard to explain, and there's many misunderstandings sometimes. So it's better if you just start and learn on your own. Make mistakes. That's not wrong. You learn from your mistakes. Your perfect project, first project is not going to be perfect. My Spitfire, everybody says it's fantastic, but I know what's in it. I know that I made many mistakes, and I wouldn't do the same restoration again. But it was a learning curve. So that's my advice too. Just don't aim at perfect quality. Just make it so you can drive it and enjoy it, and your next project is going to be perfect.
And your first project, I think this relates to David pretty well. Your first project might not actually be working on the car. It might be making a welding cart. You know, you're learning how to weld. Make yourself a welding cart to learn how to weld before you move on to a car. So little things like that. So here's a good question. Why is there so little love for TR7s and TR8s?
I don't like those wedges.
This guy beside me.
No, the reason I don't like them is because I love these cars because they're classic cars, because they look like the 60s and the early 70s, I would say. I don't even like the Spitfires Mark IV because of their square shape.
Be careful, you're going to upset some of your viewers.
Well, sorry, it's my choice, my taste. So I like the cars from the 60s. I like the shapes of these. The TR7s and TR8s, they are too modern for me. They're not bad cars, but they don't just fall into the same category that I like. I like the classic cars. For me, the 7s and the 8s are just old cars. They are not classic cars.
So I have a TR8, so obviously it's in line to be restored, so it's not in drivable condition right now. So I have an 81 fuel-injected TR8, and was kind of in the same boat maybe 10, 12 years ago. You know, when I saw a TR7 or even a TR8, TR8s are quite rare. I think there's only about 2,800 of them, so they're a very rare car. So when I first saw TR7s, I said, but they've really grown on me in the last little while. So yeah, I'm a big fan of, well, TR7s, in particular TR8s, because of that 3.5 liter. The good thing about TR8 is they're extremely comfortable. There's tons of room in there. They're great traveling cars, great for road trips. So, and obviously some of them have air conditioning as well. Some of them are automatic. So I think they're undervalued and underappreciated, and I think that's probably going to change. Hopefully it's going to change. I think I read a Haggerty article not long ago that it was an underappreciated classic and that the value should start going up. But you can get a really, really nice TR8 right now for about 15 to 16 grand, which is not a lot of money for like a mint or fairly close to concourse car. So hopefully that answers that.
When did they start making them?
Oh, geez, that's a good question. 70, I'm going to say 76, 75, somewhere around there.
Too new for me.
With obviously the hardtop, and then the convertible came later.
I'm not buying a car, and I'm not working on a car that's younger than me, and I'm 1974.
that's as a rule. Rust converter, how does it hold up after years in the weather?
Well, rust converters shouldn't be on the weather. Rust converter is just applied, and then it treats the metal, it converts the rust into something else, which is not rust anymore. And then you have to primer it and paint it. You can't leave it on the weather because it's gonna rust again. That's my answer to that.
Okay, I think I lost a question in here. I think it was Kevin asking about using exhaust paste on an exhaust. I think that was Kevin that said it. But so yes, I've used exhaust paste on an exhaust. I can't remember the actual brand name. So on my TR6, I've had, and I really shouldn't say this, I don't want to sour anybody, but I've had really bad experience. I've got a Falcon stainless steel, so a stock system, but made by Falcon in stainless steel. I've had the hardest time sealing this exhaust, particularly at the front joints. I haven't clamped down on the the clamps too much, and I haven't dented the system. I've even gone so far as to take the system entirely off the car, clean it, and then replace it and put new paste on, and that hasn't helped. I've actually tried band clamps on it as well, which help a little bit, but I've been really, really disappointed with my Falcon exhaust, and I'll probably not buy another Falcon exhaust in the future because of that. Having said that, if I go to sell my Falcon exhaust, disregard what I said about Falcon exhaust, because I'll need to sell my Falcon in order to get something else. On the TR250, just so you know, I've actually got an original set, and it's probably in one of my videos somewhere, but I actually bought an old Monza exhaust that had been sitting in some guy's garage for 25, 30 years. It's got the original sticker still on it, so that's going to go on the 250. So I'm looking forward to putting that on the car and looking forward to hearing what that sounds like. I'm going to be running on that car. It actually came with a header that I have hanging from the rafters of the garage. It's a little rusty, but I'm sure it would clean up. But I've actually bought a pace setter header to go on that car anyway. That car is going to be a little bit modded, let's say. It's going to have the 150 horsepower cam in it from the PI cars in the UK. It's got triple Webers on it. It's got the header. It's got a gas load head, a few other little bits and little goodies. So that should be a fairly quick car. I'm looking forward to getting to that. Keith Norrie, what's my signature dish? I thought this was a car discussion. I was going to say you can ask me any questions. I probably don't have a signature dish in particular. I generally, try to cook from, well, my specific job is I'm actually a research and development chef, menu design chef. So I'm classically French trained, so but I also worked in an Italian restaurant for quite a few years, so I'm pretty good at French and Italian cuisine, but I kind of really like to do fusion cuisine. So I like to do a lot of Asian style, but fusion with either French or other European sort of influence to it. So that's generally what I tend to do and I tend to like. So, but I'm a very simple guy at home. I obviously live alone, and after a long day, I can come home and I can be happy with beans and toast, for example, for dinner. If I'm out in the garage and I've had a long day and I just want something simple and comforting, I'll have beans and toast or something like that. Something really, really simple. So hopefully that answers your question. Probably not very well. That's not probably what you wanted to hear. I like chicken wings. Welding seems to be the preferred way to apply patches. Why is brazing so bad? I'm not sure that brazing is so bad. I think it's the skill level of the brazing that's the thing, because I've seen a ton of patches overlaid and brazed.
That's the main problem, yeah.
So
you can't have brazing be structural, that's the thing, because the best way to do a patch is cut off the rust and replace it with new metal and weld it in. If you use brazing for that though, you're not sure that patch is going to hold. Even though when I try to remove brazing, it's really hard. But they say because it's just bonding, it's not actually melting, and it's not.
The other thing with brazing too, if you have it on your external panels, it's a little bit more difficult to get paint or primer to stick to. So that's why I try to take out as much brazing as possible. If there's a brazed patch in the car, and I've got a ton on my car, and there was some factory brazing done as well, generally I'll leave it. If it looks okay and it looks okay structurally and there's no holes, generally I'll leave it unless I can't live with it. There are some patches that are just absolutely horrible that you don't want to see on your car. I'll remove those and I'll MIG weld a patch in instead.
Take them out because usually under a brazed patch there is a big rusty hole.
So Robert's question, foam inside the frame, I just use internal frame coating from Eastwood. Yeah, so Ratco does a foam-filled frame. So obviously it wouldn't be a moisture wicking foam, so I'm not sure what kind of foam it is, but it obviously wouldn't suck moisture in. So they do that in order to keep moisture out and to keep debris out from inside the frame. So yeah, they do that now. I've used Eastwood internal frame coating. I've used fluid film to coat the inside of my frame. So yeah, there's a number of different things you can do. There's a number of different products on the market where you can get long wands to go inside the frame and you spray it. The internal frame coatings though, I have one sort of warning on those. You want to do those after you paint your frame. Some people do it before they paint their frame, and then you can never clean because that stuff goes everywhere and sort of drips out everywhere, and it'll be very difficult to paint your frame without cleaning that 100%. It's very difficult to clean, so do it after you paint your frame, not before. Brazing was made illegal to cars and the repairs to cars in the UK. That's interesting. I bought two TR6s back in February, a 72 and a 74. Both the bodies are good. The 74 floor was fiberglass. Should I replace it with a new floor? I would say, well, I guess it depends on you. I mean, if it's structurally sound, then, and again, I don't know what your skill level is. For me, personally, I would change it out because I have the skill set and the tools to be able to do that. And it's something I've done before. And even if I haven't done it before, it's always something new to learn. The floor panels that are on the market right now are actually pretty good. I've had good success with the Heritage panels. They're pretty good stamping. There's other ones on the market that are slightly different. Some of them don't have the captive nuts on the bottom, for example. But the panels that are out there fit pretty well. So in my mind, I would go ahead and replace fiberglass. I'm not a big fan, honestly, of fiberglass fenders on a car either.
Yeah, because the paint looks different, everything looks different. You can tell from...
Again, if you're autocrossing a car or something, maybe you want fiberglass fenders. I actually had fiberglass fenders on my Tr250. First thing I did was actually tear those off, and they're sitting in storage. So maybe we want some fiberglass fenders for 250 front fenders. Anyway, the rears were metal. So yeah, I'm not a big fan of fiberglass panels, period. Sorry.
Yeah, for the floor, it depends on what you want from this car. If it's just a driver, I think it's fine. But if you want a concours cars, of course, you have to replace it. And, yeah.
So I got Ron asking me a question about the Tr3 thermostats, and I think he's talking about the bellows style thermostats, which are expensive. And quick answer to your question is no, I don't use the bellows style. I just use a traditional style thermostat. There is a mod to actually put a restriction in the bypass hose. And what I've done on my car is I've actually just put a small copper plug with a hole drilled in the bypass hole, and then obviously clamp that so that obviously that cap can't travel through the hose. So that's all I've done: traditional thermostat and the cap in the bypass. My wife made ribs. Yeah, I like ribs. Maybe I should do. I threatened to do a rib recipe on my YouTube channel at some point, so maybe I'll do that. I like cupcakes too.
For my girlfriend, I need her to make some ribs for me.
Okay, more questions. Got more questions.
Did we catch up with all the questions?
Anybody got more questions?
Okay, well, it's 8:08. Wow.
So we've been talking for a little over an hour.
Video.
Bay leaf or no bay leaf and lamb shanks? Definitely bay leaf and lamb shanks. Yeah. 72 isn't fiberglass, so I'll try skills on it. I repaired mine in the early 80s and I was able to get the rubber from it. Oh, okay. Tire recommendations for a TR6. Hey, Paul. So, again, it depends on what you want. Do you want red lines for your TR6? Or do you want black walls? Red lines, I'm not necessarily a fan of the Coker red lines. That's why I sold them to Elin.
Thank you.
They look good. They're not the best riding tire on the market. I think I like the universal red lines better. I actually like something like, what's the Diamondback, I think it is, that does the vulcanizing of the red lines on pretty much any tire you want. So, I've got a buddy who's got Vredestein Sprints on his TR6 that he's had the red line vulcanized on there. I've seen some BFGs, I've seen some Michelins with the red line. So it really depends on what you want to spend. I mean, those are pricey options when you start getting red lines vulcanized to tires. You're probably talking about $300 or $400 US per tire to get that done. So as far as black wall tires are concerned, again, if you're going on a stock rim, I'm not sure what size you're going to run. I run a 16-inch rim on my TR6. I'm probably going to run a 16 on my TR250. On the Tr3, I'm running 15-inch stock rims. Well, not stock rims, but 15-inch tires, 15 by 6s. So the widest tire, I think you want to go on personally, I know guys go to 215s, but I like 205s as being the widest tire. And again, it's going to depend on your suspension setups. My TR6 is lowered 1 inch. My TR250 will be lowered 1 inch. So it's going to depend on what you do as far as how your car is set up, as opposed to what size tire you're going to buy width-wise and what profile you're going to buy to fit your suspension setup. there are cheap tires on the market. Obviously, it's something like a Nexen tire, for instance, that are made in Korea. I have Nexen tires on my Tr3, and they seem to be holding up okay. I've got Toyo tires on another car. I've got Yokohama Avids on the Tr6 that seem to be good. So I know there's fewer and fewer choices for 15-inch tires for all seasons. You can obviously get a summer performance tire if you really wanted to, but I just have general sport touring tires on my car, and they seem to be okay. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's the best I can do. You just kind of really have to shop around. I usually use TireRack.com just to look at the reviews on tires and see if I can find something locally that matches something on Tire Rack. Obviously, if you're in the States, you can order from Tire Rack directly, but that's kind of an expensive proposition up here in Canada. So, but I find their reviews valuable and their ratings valuable on the tires. Battery is about to die, and it's 1:10 in the UK. Thanks, Mark. See ya. Have a good night. Rodney agrees with the universal red lines. They ride good and look good. Have I had any problems with the metal runner coming out from the bottom of the window glass? No, I haven't. So there's a packing piece that goes under there. What's it called? And it's a little rubber piece that goes under there.
I never use it. I don't know what it is, but
Yeah.
I never use it. I throw it away, and I use urethane to seal.
In the channel?
In the channel.
Yeah. So I've never had an issue with it. Generally, you can throw a little glue in there with these packing pieces. Obviously, you heard Elin say he uses the urethane window sealer. So those are a couple of options for you. But I've never had an issue with mine coming off. Actually, it can be a bit of a bear to get off the bottom of the glass. I've never had an issue with mine falling off.
Take them out very easy with the pry bar. I just pry them out.
Jeez.
Seriously.
It's adventurous. Okay. Do stabilizer bars make a huge difference in driving performance? Yes, if you have them set up properly. On my TR6, I'll give you another example. So I have oversized sway bars on the front and rear of the car. You obviously want to match your sway bars for them to work effectively. That's really, it depends on the setup. I mean, you just have to make sure that you match your components well for them to be effective. That's pretty much all I can say on that. Obviously, some of the cars come with the stock sway bars. I have a stock sway bar on my 59 TR3. It's pretty small and thin compared to what I've got on my TR6, which is pretty beefy. And I'll also have a pretty beefy sway bar. I have an Atco bar, but there's lots of options as far as sway bars out there. Good Parts, again, is another good place to look for sway bars for these cars. Ratco has sway bar options as well. So there's lots of options on the market to look at. And again, it depends on how your suspension is set up. I think Les just drove by.
I think so,
He
yeah.
didn't stop.
Coming back.
Okay. Let's keep going here. Will my battery be in the OEM location or in the boot? So my battery will be in the OEM location. It was in the, I'm assuming you're talking about the TR250. So yes, it's going to be in the stock location. The previous owner of my car had done some really strange plumbing in my car. It actually rerouted the heater hoses a couple of different ways if you go back and look at my videos. So he didn't have the heater hoses in the stock location. I'm not exactly sure why he did that. I'm hoping it's not something related to the throttle pull or the pull for the bell crank for the throttle shaft from the triple Webers. I hope that those hoses don't affect the travel of the bell crank. And that's the only reason I can think why he would have rerouted the hoses for the heaters. But the plan is to keep the stock battery location. Actually, oddly enough about this car, I don't know whether this car has been changed or not, but the battery box on this car was one of the only things that hadn't been rusted out.
Didn't have a battery for most of its life.
Yeah, so I don't know. The battery, because mostly that's one area on these cars that rust out quite badly on the 250s, 6s, and I'm sure the 4s as well are the battery boxes with the battery acid and water collecting under the little rib parts and that kind of stuff. So anyway, this box was perfect. So the stock battery will go back in there, or the battery will go back in the stock location. More questions, guys?
What do you mean? questions. Keep hoping.
Any more questions out there? What is my preferred HVLP gun with painting something like an engine bay? Okay. It looks like, hey, Soup, how you doing? I know you're working on your engine bay. I'm not sure if you're done yet or not, but okay, my preferred HVLP gun, and I actually showed it on my Zoom meeting for my Toronto Triumph Club, is I tend to use a small detail gun. So I actually have a mini Satajet gun, and I'm going to suggest, well, not obviously a Satajet gun, but a mini gun. A Satajet gun's nice if you can afford it, but they're very pricey. But the biggest thing I think will make a difference in an engine bay or any other tight area is either the D-cup system, so the disposable cup system that you can get for these guns, and PPG has a set, can't remember what they're called. The PPG also has a setup for these guns as well. So buy a D-cups adapter for your gun, whatever you do. The best thing about the D-cups system, outside the fact that they're disposable cups and they'll help you with the cleanup, the downside being it's a little expensive to buy these cups. But the great thing about the D-cup system is you can spray upside down. So there's tons of little nooks and crannies, and you need to sort of turn your gun, left, right, upside down. If you're painting with a traditional gun, HVLP, like a gravity feed gun, and you tip your gun up, it's going to spill out the top, or it's going to clog your vent hole in the top. So yeah, detail gun with a D-cups type disposable system, fantastic for those type of areas. Some other areas like a tire well in the Tr3s, where it's really tight to get a full-size gun in there, a small gun can work there really well as well. So hopefully that answers that question. In the Tr3, does the spare tire sit in the boot and take up space? No.
Under the boot.
So the Tr3 tire, it goes under the boot. So there's actually I think your Tr10, if I recall, has an opening for your spare to slide in there as well. So the Tr3s have that. There's the T key that actually works on two little latches on each side. And then that panel pops off, and then you slide your tire in and out. The only restrictions on that is that it takes a very, very thin tire, so nothing over a 165. Some guys even go to a space saver tire. Some guys eliminate them entirely and just have a can of puncture seal, that kind of thing, or they have an air pump. But yeah, sometimes it can be very difficult to get a tire in and out of there. There's a fair amount of heat that comes off the exhaust and tends to stick the tire to the metal in the trunk. So a lot of guys will actually put a belt on there, like an actual leather belt, so they can actually pull it out. Some guys will deflate them a little bit to get them in and out, and obviously you need an air pump to re-inflate them if you plan on using a tire. So it can be a bit of a challenge to get tires in and out of that compartment. So, but they do not take up space in the boot. The good thing is you need a lot of space. If you're going on a long trip in a Tr3, you kind of really need to plan it out, because there is not a lot of space in there. If you put your top, so your convertible top on the Tr3 is obviously not attached to the car, so the convertible top needs to go in the trunk. If you run with a tonneau cover, that needs to go in the trunk, and your side screens need to go in the trunk. So that takes up a ton of room in a Tr3, Tr2, and there's not much room left for luggage. There is some room behind the seats, fortunately, because there's not going to be a lot of room in the boot or in the trunk if you've got all your weather gear with you on a trip. Hopefully that answers that question. I know you're all about restorations, but have you thought about transplanting an electric drivetrain in a Triumph? No, not personally. There is a guy in our club, in the Toronto Triumph Club.
Oh, did it already?
He does. He has an electric Spitfire.
No, he crashed.
Well, someone crashed into him, and he wrote his Spitfire off. So now he's doing an electric TR6.
He's done.
So I'll be interested to see that once we get back into club meetings. So it has been done. I've seen some write-ups from the TR Register in the UK on electric conversions. So it's not something that interests me. I'm not sure if it interests you.
I am really interested, but the price is still way off my range. One day I'm gonna get into that. I'm really interested, but it is.
Obviously, one of the big attractions for me in a TR6 is the sound, and a TR250, and I would honestly miss the sound of the car if it sounded like a golf cart or an electric mixer.
Yeah, but if
But
it
then again,
speeds up like a
yeah, like a
rocket,
yeah, if it speeds up like a Tesla,
yeah,
ludicrous mode, then yeah, I might be able to get over not having any exhaust sound, or maybe I could have something piped into the cockpit or something. Maybe I could get TR6 sounds piped into the cockpit of a Tesla.
yeah, you can run
Right?
on your
I'll
phone
do
and
that.
just
Maybe
play
maybe
it on
that's
the
an
audio
option.
system.
I hadn't thought about that. So yeah, maybe I'll do that. Keith, again, stock wiring harness fuse box are upgraded AAW. So I am not the strongest wiring guy. Here's my wiring guy sitting beside me. So I am not running. So AAW is a really, really nice harness. I think there's another guy, Mark, I think it's Mark Goldblatt, who also does another style of wiring harnesses, aftermarket, upgraded harnesses for these cars. They're fantastic. But for me, I'm not running a ton of electrics. The only thing that I'll probably be running on my car will be an electric fan and probably driving lights, and that's it. I won't have a radio, won't have anything else. I might have a hookup for a GPS, but I am going back with a stock harness I did in my TR6. I've had absolutely no issues with stock harnesses in my TR3 or in my TR6. Hopefully not going to be issues in the TR250. I've got a new harness from the Roadster factory. So I've had no issues with stock harnesses, and it's a little easier for me not being an electrical wizard. I can follow schematics and do stock harnesses. I'm sure I could probably do an AAW harness if I really wanted to, but it's not something I really want to do or not something I really need. But there's lots of tutorials out there to do it, lots of online forums to help you through it. Guys like Keith are going to help you through if you have any issues. Again, Bob Danielson's site, I believe he was one of the first guys I saw do the AEW wiring harness as well. I was just going to mention, I'm just kind of looking over it. I brought some books out, and I was looking at my Dan Masters electrical book, and I was going to, reference that. That's a great book. I think Dan Masters was involved originally in AEW, and he's written a great book on TR6 and electrics. So if you're a TR6 owner, highly recommend that book. It's very, very helpful. For guys like me, it's kind of written in layman's terms, probably a little advanced for you. But anyway, I'm glad that I have resources like Elin here. I have a gentleman in the club named Clive help me for Scott Douglas. So generally, I'll call club members who have certain levels of expertise if I have wiring issues, and that seems to work. Well, that's what clubs are about, right? They're about helping guys out. So if I need help, I call for it, and I try to learn along the way. And it's definitely been helpful having guys around to teach me.
Yeah, I think too, if you're running stock electrical components, you just need the original harness. You don't need anything upgraded. And I personally do keep my original harnesses on all the cars that I restore. And if I need to do something like on my Spitfire, I have an amplifier, so I have audio and stuff. For this, I just run additional circuits because the original harnesses, they only have 4 circuits, I believe, on the TR6s, and that's a little bit weird because if one thing pops, then everything pops. But for my Spitfire especially, I added electrical fan, I added that amplifier and everything, but for this, and air horns, but for this I just run separate circuits. And
Okay, Mike has a question about getting POR 15 out of his gas tank. I'm assuming that you had a POR 15 liner kit in your tank, and for some reason it's becoming detached from your tank. So I guess there's a couple of different options. One, I've seen one guy here's a couple options for you. One guy actually hooked his tank up, and I think his name's Ed, if I'm not mistaken. Ed hooked his tank up to a cement mixer. He strapped it to the front of a cement mixer. He threw chain in or bolts and nuts and bolts, and he's just turned the cement mixer on and spun the tank, which of course, and you can do that for a rusty tank as well. So either chain or nuts and bolts basically, and shake the tank. So you can either do it manually or you can do it with a machine and sort of just spin it. Well, you can probably do it on cement mixer on low.
yeah.
And just sort of spin it, and that hopefully will get all the coatings out of there and all the rust out of there. I'm not going to suggest anything like muriatic acid or anything like that. I don't want to.
I did muriatic acid in my Spitfire.
So you heard him, right? I'm not suggesting muriatic acid, but muriatic acid scares me a little bit. Doesn't scare him, but you got to be very careful, obviously, with muriatic acid, whether it's either chemical burns or whether it's inhaling it, that kind of thing. I'm not big fan of muriatic
Oh,
acid,
I
but
left.
anyway.
I left the open bottle next to my tools for overnight, and the next morning I came and
Etched your tools?
Yeah, everything was rusted.
It's crazy. Let's keep going down here. Kevin Moore. So I'm not sure who this question is for. He says, Cheech and Chong asked, "Who cut your hair, man?" So I'm not sure if he's asking me or you.
For you, I don't know
Yeah.
who cuts yours.
Yeah.
Mine, I just cut myself like 3 hours ago.
You're looking fantastic.
I just cut it myself, especially during the pandemic.
Okay, John's asking a question on whether I run a heater in my TR3, and yes, I do, because it gets cold here in the fall. So it's nice to actually have a heater, and it doesn't actually work too bad.
It works fantastic.
Yeah, so they work quite well. I kind of understand why he's asking this question, because there's another gentleman on the British Car Forum who's just had a problem with his heater core on his TR3, and he's looking for a replacement core. I don't think there is an aftermarket core like on the market right now, so you're probably going to have to either take your core out and take it to a shop to get repaired, and obviously you have to understand. I think the pressure that goes through those cores is very low. I think 7 pounds off the top of my head again. So yeah, because if you put a lot of pressure in those, they just basically they look like an accordion when you're done with them. So you got to be careful with the pressure you put through them. But yeah, I'm not sure of an aftermarket vendor for reproduction cores for those. So it might be something you either have to have repaired or look at something like eBay for that. Some other guys might know there might be some UK sources for those, but it's not something I'm aware of, and I'm not really aware of it because the cores that I have are actually good. Okay. What's next?
I don't know you. I don't follow anymore. How many people are there?
I don't know.
There are like 50 people. 51.
More questions, guys?
Are we gonna?
Would you switch to LED lights to LED? So there are some very good LED conversions on the market. I think Lights Up is one of the conversions, and yes, I would. If I had an issue with my current lights, then I'd probably upgrade to something like Lights Up, which have, I guess, the panels already custom made. I think they do them for TR3s, 6s, 4s. They basically have them all on a circuit board already for the cars. So yeah, those are good options. Obviously, there's the screw-in bulb types too. I assume you're talking about the running lights on the car, but I've seen a lot of conversions on the dash lights as well. Not something I've done. If my systems were not working, then I generally don't drive my cars a lot at night anyway, so it's not something that I think is a kind of a critical upgrade for me. Generally, I'm off the road by nighttime. I think, what is it? Real gentlemen don't motor after night or something like that. I can't remember the saying, but something like that.
I motor all the time
Yeah.
after night.
So yeah, I'm not generally on the road too often late at night. So it's not an upgrade that I really have considered. I know lots of guys have done them with really good results, and I know there are kits out there that you can utilize to help you along the way. So hopefully that answers your question. Okay. I just answered, I think Mike is asking again about the best way to get the 415 out of a gas tank and not leave any excess. I think I answered that question already.
Yeah.
Kevin, do either have, okay, aluminum radiator, Kevin. So yeah, I have an opinion on that. I have an aluminum radiator in my TR6. I have a Wizard aluminum radiator in the TR6 and a Wizard aluminum radiator in the TR3. I think they look good as far as the bling factor is concerned. Do I think that they cool any better than a good stock radiator? No, I don't think so. As long as you're a stock radiator, or have a new, old style radiator, but new, as long as your old radiator is in good condition, I think it cools just as well as an aluminum radiator. The aluminum looks great. But realistically, in a TR3, for example, you don't see much of the radiator anyway, because it's kind of tucked under the front apron. You get more of a bling factor, obviously, in the TR250 and the TR6. But is it a necessary thing? I don't think so. But they look cool. Peter McDonald, I have a TR6 completely torn down and working on body repairs. My floors are intact with no big holes. Just a few pinholes and pitting, what should I do? From the undersides, they look fine. So, pitting, what do you suggest for pitting?
Fitting, I just leave it on. I just leave it on as long as you seal it nicely with primer and it's painted nicely, it's gonna last. Fitting is a problem if it's not covered, and soon it is gonna be a big hole. But if it is painted nicely and if it's protected,
Yeah, the only thing that I could maybe suggest for pitting would be either possibly doing a little skim coat of fiberglass, like like we're talking pinholes, right? So a little skim of short strand fiberglass, kitty hair, tiger hair they call it, over top of that, or even something like an epoxy stick I've used before. So the two-part epoxy that you sort of mash together, you can sort of massage some of that in there just to close up the pinhole before you prime and paint it or pour 15 in it or whatever you're going to do. You don't necessarily have to cut out. If you've got very slight pinhole issues, then, and we're not talking a lot of pinholes, so if you've got a lot of pinholes and it's very lacy, then obviously you need to cut that section out and replace it with fresh metal. But if you're just talking a few pinholes here and there, then that's my suggestion. Don't go too crazy. Otherwise, you'll be getting into a full body off restoration before you know it.
absolutely, yeah. I was working on the valance on the the 74 TR6 today on the inner part from the engine bay, and I noticed a big, like this size area which was pitted where the front bumper mounts, and I was debating whether I should cut out and weld it, and I said no, it's like it's gonna be painted, it's gonna be primered, it's gonna be protected, so I'm not gonna do anything there.
Okay, so Adam is asking how difficult it is to replace a wood dash on a TR6. So I can answer that, I guess.
Yeah.
So in my mind, replacing the wood dash is not that difficult. I've done it a number of times. It helps to have sort of smallish hands to be able to get in behind the dash. I can pretty much, so there's a service position on the, what they call a service position on the dash, where you just sort of unscrew the dash and sort of lean it forward so you have some access. You can also pull the ashtray out of the top of the dash to be able to get some access there. But for the most part, what I do is I just reach up under the dash, and I can actually feel my way around in there. I've done it so often now. There's knurled nuts on the back of the gauges that you need to detach, and they've got a bracket on the back of the gauges. So once you undo those knurled nuts on the speedometer and tach, for example, those will come out. There's other gauges like the oil feed line where you've got an oil feed on the back that you need to unscrew. So some of the smaller gauges are a little bit more difficult to get out, but really it's pretty easy after you get the gauges out. Really the dash just pulls forward, and you can just put a new dash in place and then fix your gauges. Now, having said that, important thing obviously, if you're electrically challenged like me, obviously is to, whatever wire you pull off, label it so you can put it back on where you took it off.
Color coded, so it's
Color-coded
really
wire diagrams, so it's not that hard to screw it up if you're paying attention. There's wiring diagrams out there, but my suggestion is just to wire or to label wires as you remove them and just put them back on when you put your new dash back in, when you put your gauges back in.
If you can lay on your back with your head in the wheel well, that helps a lot, and I'm being serious about that. That's how I work on dashes sometimes.
Yeah. More videos on the GT6.
It's a hard question. Like I mentioned before that I was working on my GT6, like almost 2 years ago, almost every night and every weekend. But life changed. Like I said, I separated with my ex, then I had to take care of my son every other week, and the times when my son was not with me, I had to catch up with other things, so I slowed down. I kept going in momentum like till the end of 2018, I think, but then I had to really stop. And now, actually, I live a happier life. I have a girlfriend with 3 more kids, so I have 4. And my weekends and my nights are pretty busy, and I'm not complaining about that. I'm really happy, but it's hard to go to the shop and work on the GT6. I will finish it one day, but hopefully now I'm hoping that somehow I'm gonna be able to move into a house with a garage, because now I live in the house. Before I was living in an apartment building, so it was impossible. Now I live in a house, but the thing is I don't have the garage, so still a problem. But maybe one day I'm gonna move into a house which has a garage, and then I'm gonna have something like David, where I can go out every night and have a power hour. I can go out in the weekend for 2-3 hours and do something. But now, if I want to go to the shop on the weekend, for example, it's like probably 45 minutes drive one direction, so I'm losing hour and a half just to go and do some work for 1 hour. So that's why it doesn't work.
The good thing is he now only lives about 10 minutes away from me, so I've encouraged him to come and help me on my power hours anytime he wants to. But as long as I got beer in the fridge, then I have a chance to get him here. So
even that you don't do for me anymore.
Is it better to rebuild the clutch and brake cylinder or replace them? So you can get them re-sleeved. Again, you'd have to probably get them sent out or to get re-sleeved if there's pitting in the bores. You can rebuild them if your cylinders are okay. You can rebuild them, no problem at home. But in some cases, you may need to send them out to get re-sleeved. And if you have to do that, then in my case, I would probably just end up buying new. I haven't had any issues with buying new ones. I haven't had any leaks or problems, so no quality issues. So I don't have a problem purchasing new versus getting things re-sleeved.
I have experience with my clutch cylinder on the master cylinder on the Spitfire. I tried to rebuild it, I think 2 times, because that's my first thing to do. I'm Bulgarian, so first I would try to rebuild something before I buy a new one. And I rebuilt it twice and it kept leaking, and finally I got a new one. It's aftermarket and it's like 20-30 bucks, I don't know, it was very cheap, so I got a new one, and ever since I have no problem. So even though I like to rebuild things instead of buying new ones for master cylinders, I also recommend buying a new one.
Okay, question from David regarding changing his gauges out. So I'm not sure if you want to change gauges out to something aftermarket, or you're looking for stock gauges but new or rebuilt gauges. So if you're looking for that, and I'm not sure if you have the gauges, or but my suggestion is, first of all, there's lots of tutorials online if you want to rebuild your own gauges. There's a gentleman by the name of Paul Rigo who has a really good tutorial on taking apart your gauges, cleaning and painting them, and reassembling them. I think Bob Danielson on his site has some information on there as well. There's lots of information out there on rebuilding your own gauges. If you don't have the confidence to do that, there's shops like Nissinger in New York, I think they are, and there's a place called West Valley Instruments who can actually rebuild your gauges for you. They can actually do amazing things as well with your stock gauges. For instance, they can put white faces on your gauges or magnolia faces on your gauges, so they can make your old gauges look brand new, and they can give them another look. As far as different other brands of gauges, I'm not really familiar. Obviously, there's companies out there like VDO, for example, that do gauges off the top of my head. So you may want to try to find something that will work. I know I've seen some resto mods that have aftermarket gauges. In some cases, if you're not going for that resto mod look, brand new gauges look a little suspect in my mind. So I'd prefer to keep sort of the stock look. But if you want to change it up a little bit, like I said, maybe try changing the gauge face colors. So I've seen some really nice cars with those white or magnolia gauges. What brake fluid am I using? I'm a big fan of .5 brake fluid. I use .5 in both my clutch and brake systems. I've never had a failure, and I should probably knock on wood.
It doesn't work on cardboard.
I've never had a failure with .5. The thing obviously with .3 is it just, if you have a leak, and I've actually had a leak in my Tr3 in one of the fittings, and then it can be the most frustrating thing to have a brand new restored car and to come out the next day and the .3 has eaten all the paint off of your firewall. So that's why I use .5. I don't have to deal with that. I know some guys say, well, it doesn't swell the seals the same way. I think you actually get masters from the companies that say using .5 will void your warranty. I've never had an issue running .5 in my cars, and I'll continue to do that. So the TR250 project is the next one out. We'll have to do brakes. That will be getting .5 as well. No issues in my mind. Graham, second year synchro is getting angry. Downshift works the car's best temporary fix. When I changed the oil, it looked like I struck gold on top of the oil again. So yeah, it's there's no real temporary fix to that. It's just going to continue to get worse and worse, unfortunately, as it wears further down. You'll probably end up having to keep it in gear eventually, or it's going to be grinding when you change gears. So maybe double clutching might help for a little while, but yeah, there's no real solution to that other than tearing into the transmission and fixing that. Unfortunately, I don't think changing to a different oil like a red line or a synthetic or whatever is going to be a solution to your problem. I think you actually need to get in the trans and fix the synchro. Okay. So he's talking about, that's the TR6 overdrive he's talking about. So, okay, more questions, guys? We've been on for an hour and 40 minutes, so that's not too bad.
And there's still 52 people watching, so.
So hopefully. What sequence would you follow when putting together the dash and dash top on a TR4? Would you install the instruments on the dash? So, dash top needs to go on first because the dash, and I'm pretty sure on the TR4 it's the same, you might know better than me. The dash wraps under the metal dash, so the edge of the vinyl on the dash pad wraps under, and there's these little studs on the bottom of the bulkhead that it sort of fits into.
TR6, I have no idea about.
I think the TR4 will probably be the same, yeah.
Yeah.
And then you put the metal dash in. As far as the fixing the gauges, I generally don't do that personally, because remember, you still got to wire all the gauges up. So generally what I'll do is I'll pull the wires, I'll put the dash up, and again, I think you said TR4, so this could be a white dash car or it could be a wood dash car.
Yeah.
Mine's a 62, so it's a white dash car. Anyway, I would probably have the wires coming up through, and I'd probably wire up the gauge, then put it in, and then I'd reach back in and put the bracket on the back. Sometimes you have to ground wire in the back there as well, depending on what gauge it is, and then put the knurled nuts on. Again, I can reach up and do it. I'm pretty experienced doing that. As Elin said, you may find it easier laying on your back with a flashlight and shining it up under the dash to see a little bit better. So that's my suggestion, is to do the gauges after you've got the dash in. Okay. Checking in from Norwood, Ontario. Hello, Tertessa. He's probably disappointed that he's a car show guy as well, and obviously all the car shows have been canceled around here for the next foreseeable future. I think all but one show have been canceled here. I think there's a show in July. That's the only one that left standing so far, and that'll probably end up getting canceled anyway. Yeah. So unfortunately, yeah, it's not a good year as far as car shows are concerned. So okay, so you're welcome, Sue. No problem. White dash, yeah, I'm a big fan, Robert, of the white dash cars. I actually last week we just stored my 62 TR4 in a better storage location, and I actually thought about taking the dash out of it and just taking the dash and the gauges out and just having something at home from the TR4 to work on, and you know, in front of, like I need more projects to work on, but sometimes, you know, you want a bit of a break and you just want to kind of hang out in front of the TV. Well, you know, working on gauges on my coffee table is kind of therapeutic for me. Some nice little easy job to take inside. I travel quite a bit as well, so in some cases I've had it suggested to me that I take a gauge along with me when I travel and work on it in my hotel room. And I thought about it. I thought, well, if the maid ever comes into my room and sees all these gauges and wiring and stuff on the desk in the room, she's going to call security on me. So,
yeah, imagine in the airplane seeing.
Yeah, so I generally don't do that. It's not a bad idea, but it could be a bad idea. So what I do is that, you know, every now and then, if I'm looking for a small inside project, the gauges are something to work on, and I really like looking at you know, a newly finished, freshened up gauge, and that white dash I think is stunning in those cars. I mean, I like the wood dashes obviously in the 250s and the TR6s, but I really like the white dash look, just something different. So I thought about doing that. I still might do that and might go up and grab the dash and the gauges. It's fairly easy to get those out. So yeah, it's a good look. It's a good display piece actually, just to have the dash with all the gauges. It's a good motivation actually to have that dash done and ready to go back in a car. If I want to just refresh my motor, how far should I go? Is it worth replacing rod and crank bearings, or if I do, would I have to get the rotating assembly balanced? Well, that's a tough question. So yeah, you really have to do an evaluation on your motor. I mean,
Taking it apart means like you already took it apart. You don't
I,
go with just refreshing. You just measure everything and do it the right way.
yeah, I would have to know more conditions about the engine. Is it
Mm.
smoking badly? So do you need new rings for the pistons? From at the least thing you'd probably want to do is pop the oil pan off and check, take a couple of the bearing shells off, and have a look at them and see if they what condition they're in. Obviously, I mentioned crankshaft thrust washers. You want to check those as well. So really, those are the first things I kind of do. Maybe compression check.
I don't believe in refreshing a motor.
No,
Like
you like to rebuild it
if you
entirely.
refresh a motor, you would just take the head out and do the head. Like
Some guys will do the bearings, obviously, just to, you know, whether they have an oil pressure problem, for example, they'll do the bearings in the bottom end just to get a little bit longer life out of it. It's maybe a short-term fix, but some guys will actually do that with the engine in the car, and that's so it can be done. So it really depends on how far you want to go. I know it's been done. I know bottom ends have been done, top ends have been done independently or at the same time. So it really depends on how much you want to spend, what your skill level is, and what you want out of the car.
labor-wise, it's the same. If you rebuild the engine, like if you need machining, then it's a little bit more complicated. But if you take it out and change all gaskets and seals and do all the measurements, and hopefully you don't need all the parts machined, then you
I
can.
didn't get that. Could you try again?
Siri, I wasn't talking to you. Sorry.
Siri's answering questions for us now.
So yeah,
I'm listening.
What are the best way to refresh a bottom end of a TR6 engine?
I shut her off.
Oh, she doesn't know.
Sorry. Anyway, so yeah, I don't believe in something that is called engine refreshment. You just take it apart and fix it the right way.
What is the best way to check the TR3 trafficator and stator tube before assembly? Again, it's going to be a tough one for you, John, because I don't think you had this car on the road before. As far as the stator tube is concerned, obviously just make sure it's straight, not broken. Make sure you have the little there's little bulbous parts on the stator tube. Just make sure they're there and not broken off. As far as the trafficator is concerned, again, it's a tough call. If you're getting it, you know, clicking and actuating on either side without actually having it attached to the car, you should sort of hear it click and then go back to neutral and click on the other way. And generally that's, you know, if those are working, then generally most of the time the switch will work. Obviously, there are, again, tutorials online about how to take them apart. I think it's the TR Register Australia has a really good trafficator head disassembly and assembly if you need to do that. It's a little fiddly. There's some pretty small screws back in there. Again, it's not something I did on my 60 TR3 because I went for the rack and pinion conversion, and I don't have the trafficators working on my 60 TR3. I do still have the stock trafficator and stator tube in my 59. So, and again, that's something that I checked before I took the car apart to make sure it was working. I'm not sure if you have the ability to do that. It's kind of a suggestion for anybody before they actually get into doing a restoration. And I kind of made the mistake of not doing this on my first restoration, was to check the that things like your windshield wipers work, for example, or your windshield wipers. Some people don't do that. They just automatically tear into a car right away.
I don't do it either.
You want to, well, I'd suggest you check things like, you know, make sure your heater fan functions, or your windshield washer motor or wiper motor works, or your squirter works. Like, go through all the electrical systems and make notes on things that work before you actually start tearing them apart. That's a good piece of advice. So you know whether
I take
you
apart
need to
and rebuild even things that work. So I don't care if it's working or not. I take it apart and I rebuild it.
Yeah. Let's see. Any cars and coffee? No, no cars and. I don't know if the cars and coffees are canceled up here or not. I haven't seen too many shows that are continuing to be held. So, what about the Alpha? When is it going to be roadworthy?
Oh, that's a good question.
It's a good, I keep threatening to bring the Alpha home. The Alpha is very close to being. Well, it is technically roadworthy. It needs a few upgrades. I have a brand new exhaust for it to go on the car. I have some brand new transmission mounts for it, some fuel lines. You remember we put a temporary fuel line just to start the car? I've got the new fuel line. So there's very few minor jobs. We obviously, the last time we worked on it, we got it up and running and moving under its own power. The car is actually a very low mileage car. I think it's only got 55,000 or 56,000 kilometers on it from brand new. So the car is in actually very good shape. It just needs a few things like the exhaust system. The exhaust system was torn off the car because when it arrived, it actually came from the west coast of Canada, it came from BC, and when it arrived on the transport truck, they had ripped the exhaust off, and it was actually hanging straight down. So it didn't survive its trip very well. So that exhaust needs to be replaced. It was beyond its time to be replaced anyway. It was in pretty rough shape. So exhaust, trans mounts. There's the I have a broken off indicator stock on the signals that I found under the seat. I'm blaming that one on Les. I think he broke it off. Just kidding, Les. Anyway, so that's got to be replaced. That part alone I think is about $350 US. So it's a bit of an investment to get that part in. So really not a lot of stuff to do on the Alpha. It's just actually finding time to do it, particularly when I'm trying to get the TR250 into epoxy primer, like over coated in epoxy primer and then into primer. You don't necessarily want to have any vehicles at home and out in the driveway or anywhere close by. It's a bit of a pain. I've got 2 motorcycles that are a bit of a pain already that I have to keep moving around. You can't see it obviously because you're facing me, but I've actually got my trailer in the driveway now where I'm actually storing the body panels from the 250. That's just to get them out of the garage because I'm in the final stages of getting this car ready for primer. And again, I can't have another car in the garage. I don't want to keep the Alpha outside, so it's going to have to wait, unfortunately, for a little bit longer. I've threatened to bring that home a couple times last spring. This spring, it just has to be a good time for it to happen. Yeah, I've got too many projects. You don't have to tell me. Okay. What made you choose a Triumph instead of a Austin Healey? I think for me, the reason I chose a Triumph because I like, obviously, my first recollection of Triumphs, by the way, was not a TR6. It was actually a Spitfire. I remember playing around with a Spitfire. I was in a buddy's car in a 77 Malibu, a mint green Malibu, and we were chasing the Spitfire around, and that was my first introduction to Triumphs in general. But for some reason, I was always attracted to the TR6, so I think I got my first TR6 when I was about 23. I just got out of university, so I've always been interested in Triumphs and TR6s in general, and generally it's probably what I didn't get an Austin Healey. I love the Austin Healey, but the Austin Healeys were not affordable. The TR6s you could find a very, very cheap project. I think I bought my first TR6 for $3,500. That was way back then, so it wasn't in great shape, but it was a project that I could buy, I could drive, I could learn on, I could do my own maintenance. So Healeys, again, I like them. I've never had an experience of driving a Healey, and I'm not gonna say this lightly, but I've heard Healeys don't even drive that well. I could be wrong, but anyway, a Healey's obviously was a more expensive car to begin with, and it's still a more expensive car. So that's my answer why I don't have a Austin Healey. I like them, I love the look of them, but for me they're just not affordable. At one point, a couple of years ago, if you're ever watching Barrett Jackson, I think Healeys were going for $80,000 to $100,000 US, which is just insane. Yeah. I think they've come down quite a bit in price, but yeah, for a little while there, they were kind of unaffordable, like 911s are today. Like older 911s are through the roof at the moment. Yeah. I'll tell you what, one car I'd like to do. This might surprise people. So yeah, I've got a lot of projects, but if I was to add another project, and I don't know whether I'd fit in it or not, but I'd really like to get a Porsche 914. So who wants to see me get a 914 on the channel? I think that would be a lot of fun. If I could fit in it. Apparently they're quite roomy, so they're very low to the ground, so that might be a bit of an issue, but again, once I'm in, I'm in. Just getting me out might be the problem.
Just you have to make sure that you know which one is front, which one is the back of the car, because it's hard to recognize it.
Yeah. All right, here we are. Chris Fisher is late to the game. Chris is restoring a, what year is Chris's Spitfire?
I think 64.
And Chris is
really
just
sure.
on the finishing stage. He's done a fantastic job. We've been following him for the last couple of years. So, was it Dorothy? Dorothy, right?
Dorothy, yeah. He's doing a lot of research on forums and stuff, and he's bringing up some really cool content on YouTube. So,
yeah, I think a lot of guys that watch myself and watch Elin also watch Chris as well. Yeah. So he's been doing a fantastic job. Chris has painted his own car as well, and he's just in the final stages of putting it back together.
He just came up with the solution for the rattling lock for the doors. you
Oh, yeah.
have on the
I saw that,
TR6s, on
yeah.
the Spitfires and GT6s,
Yeah.
the same problem. He found the solution to that. Probably, I don't know if you, Chris, came up with it or you found it somewhere, but it's a fantastic solution. I told you in the comments, I normally play with hose clamps there. I try to somehow fasten the things a little bit stronger, but this is a fantastic thing. So that's what I'm gonna do on my next project. Thank you.
So Chris says his is a 66.
Oh, 66.
Yeah. 914 is huge inside. It would jump on one if I could find it. Yeah, that's the problem. Is finding a 914 that they're really going up in prices too. Obviously, I'd really like a 914 6, but they're like hen's teeth. So if I was to get a 914, I'd probably want a 2-liter. Yeah, it's fuel injected, but sure I could figure that out. You can obviously do Weber conversions for those as well. So yeah, I've been watching a lot of videos lately on 914. So who knows? Maybe sometime in the future, if I decide to switch the car collection up a little bit, I can get a 914. The good thing is the bodies are relatively small, but I know they can rust really, really badly. So that might be a new learning curve. It's probably a car you hate too, right?
Definitely.
Well, I'll throw you under the bus. I think they're cool. All right, so yeah, Robert. Yeah, Robert, you have good taste. 914 on your list too. Okay, keep more questions, guys. We'll be here for as long as you're here. How many people we got? We still got 53 people watching. So if anybody's got any more questions, now's the time. Let me know if I've missed a question. I'm trying to go backwards. Oh, is there a gear oil that I can use in both my transmission with J-type overdrive and diff? Yes, there is, David. It can be a little bit difficult to get, so you're supposed to use GL4 gear oil. It must be beer time. So you're supposed to use GL4 gear oil in both if you're looking at the actual manual. So GL4 gear oil in both your differential and your transmission. GL4 can be very difficult to get. I use a product made by Miller Oils. I can actually get it here locally. There's a distributor. So if you want to look up Miller Oils, they have a classic GL4 that you can use. Having said that, and again, you'll have to do your research. From what I understand now, so the big thing about people using something like a GL5 is, from my understanding, it eats yellow metal, so brass, brass or bronze. It'll eat the brass or bronze, so you can't use that in your diff or your trans. I think modern GL5s might be okay, but you'd have to do some research on that. Anyway, I stick with GL4. If you want to run something in your overdrive, I've been running 30W non-detergent in my J-type overdrive. I run it in my A-type overdrive, and I've never had any issues. So there's a good article on why to choose the oil that I do. If you look at Quantum Mechanics, they have a good oil discussion and some tests that they did on different oils in overdrive transmissions. You could use 2050 in an overdrive if you really wanted to. But I use the 30 weight non-detergent. Hopefully that answers your question. Okay, let's keep going here. The GT6 question for Elin. Roof eyebrow, typical rust area. I'll wait for him to answer that. I know he had a lot of repairs on the front edge of his windscreen that he did little patches in, so maybe I'll let him answer that question for you, since that's his area of expertise. Colton says we got our TR6 running for the first time in 20 years, so that's awesome. Congratulations. Hopefully it's running well and you've got all the bugs worked out of it. Got a question on a GT6 for you, Elin, when you get back.
Are you talking to yourself?
Yes, I am. So Kevin saying 914 30 years ago, 6'4", 220. Used to travel with friends. See, that just encourages me more to want to get a 914. So that's good information. Give me a good base recipe for lamb shanks. I'll send you one. I can't go into it now. Okay, quick recipe for lamb shanks.
Huh? What?
So basically you want a mirepoix. So mirepoix, celery, onions, carrots.
Excuse me, are we still talking?
Yeah,
Speaking
doing
English?
quick. Yeah. So mirepoix, celery, carrots, onions, diced. Basically, that's where you start with. You can sear your lamb shanks off in a little bit of canola or olive oil first. Add them to the pot with the mirepoix. Add in some stock and braise those. Braise that. Then you can sort of strain your mirepoix out of your stock, and then you can thicken that with a roux, or you can just let it reduce, and you should be good to go. You can actually do some lamb demi-glace as well with that if you wanted to, but that's just really. Oh, and don't forget the bay leaves. You like bay leaves, so and whatever else you want. Maybe some red wine, some rosemary in there. So there's a recipe for you. All right, what kind of beer? What kind of beer are you drinking?
Cold beer.
Cold beer.
Well,
Right now it's got Heineken.
This one is Heineken.
Maybe Heineken will sponsor you. Should put that up there.
Your brand here. You see? Sponsor me and I'll put your brand here.
Hi Dennis, welcome to the chat. Looks like you got quite a few projects there. TR6, a Volvo P1800, which I really like, the P1800. Isn't that the Saint car, the P1800? I like that with the little wings on the back. Chrysler Newport convertible, that's a huge car. So it's got to be a huge difference between the TR6 and the Newport as far as restoring that, as far as driving it is concerned too. 440 V8, awesome. So that'd be a fun cruiser for sure. So
What was the GT6 question?
the GT6 question was regarding the. Let me see if I can go back here. If I can find that again. He was talking about, I think, the top lip of the GT6 windscreen that you repaired.
Yeah.
So, how do you approach that? Elin, GT6 roof eyebrow typical rust area. Would you cut out the inner structure then repaired? How would you approach this area as a preventative action?
A preventative action?
Yeah. So would you rust treat that, or would you put some sort of encapsulator, or?
That was like 2 years ago. I don't really remember what caused that, but I think what caused that was condensation from inside, I believe, because
So what would you do to prevent that in the future? Same thing from happening.
sealing the trim piece on the outside, because that also gets water inside. So when I installed my trim piece, I put seam sealer inside and I just pushed it in. But that's the first thing that you have to do. And there was another solution that, what was the channel name, Mike? Like Fanatic Builds?
Fanatic Builds, yeah.
They just canceled this piece.
They shaved it.
They shaved it. But if you want to keep your car original, yeah, I think that's the only way. I think in the first place, the condensation was a problem, and because of this internal structure there, the car wasn't even primered there. The roof wasn't even primered there from the factory. So, as a preventive measure, maybe you should just cut out this internal structure and spray it, or find another way to spray it, or maybe even use that East Coast frame sealer that you can spray inside, because there I'm sure it is bare metal from the factory.
So John has a question about the best way to convert rust on the smaller pieces to reuse parts.
To convert rust on smaller pieces to reuse parts?
So I'm not sure if you're talking about a body panel or something else, John, but
Sandblasting and primering, or rust converting and primering, or
yes, lots of rust converters on the market, whether it's a brush on or a gel style, or obviously there's solutions that you can soak parts in that convert rust pretty well. There's zinc coatings, there's sprays, for example. Some parts I actually sandblast. I know you're not a big fan of sandblasting, but if it's a small part that I can sandblast with my little, either my bucket blaster or with my handheld gun, I'll actually blast it. Depends on the part. So lots of different ways to convert rust. Some of the rust converters on the market are not great. You'll probably find one that works for you, but some work better than others. Some obviously leave a converted surface, like it turns black, or some of them turn purple. Some of them leave sort of a zinc phosphate coating.
yeah, you definitely, after it's dried, after it is rust converted and dried, you want to wipe it, and even if you do a wire wheeling on top, that's the best thing to do.
Graham says he sprayed some evaporust in his hardtop front edge. Yeah, it might help to a degree. I've used evaporust on one of my projects. I think you saw recently. I was doing the shims, the trailing arm shims, and I used evaporust and soaked that for a period of a couple days, and it seemed to work pretty well. It was longer than, of course, what they advertise, and you kind of need to agitate it a little bit. So yeah, I guess repeated coatings of that would probably work. you might try something like a gel or something that you could keep, but apparently you have to keep those wet, so for them to really work well. So maybe a couple of continuous applications and just keeping it wet would probably work. Chris Fisher says vinegar as well. I've seen that done in the past. There's a guy I watch called SWRNC, Southwest Rod and Custom. My friend Pete's a big proponent of using vinegar to etch metal and knock out rust.
So if you have a lot of time in your hands, then you can use electrolysis. That's what I did on the 74 TR6 parts. All the suspension, that's what I did when I was working on other things, because I had lots of time, so I can just put 3-4 parts in a bath for 24 hours.
Yeah. So electrolysis is one thing you could do. Molasses. You ever seen molasses?
Mm-hmm.
So there's a couple guys that have restored TRs. Scott Best comes to mind in the UK, who was restoring a Herald in a little Austin.
He disappeared.
Yeah. Anyway, he had a big molasses bin in his backyard, and he used to put fairly big parts in the molasses and just let them sit. So I guess it depends on the time that you have as well. I mean, molasses takes a little bit of time to work, but it's natural. And you probably make some, I don't know, cookies, ginger snaps or something out of it after you're done with it.
For me, electrolysis worked well because you will see in the next few videos about the TR4, the TR6. I already started working on the suspension a little bit. All the parts, I just needed to dip them, leave them for 24 hours. The next morning I needed just to scrub them, because you need to scrub them with some, what do you call that, the pad? The
3M Scotch-Brite pad?
Yeah, the Scotch-Brite pad. Yeah. Just underwater, dry them and primer them right away. And it was taking me literally 20 minutes a day to do 3, 4, 5, 6 parts. I don't know how many. But in 2 weeks, all the suspension parts were done and primered, and now I just have to scap them again, the primer, and paint them. So electrolysis is a very good solution for me if you have the time to wait.
Yep. Any more questions, guys? I'm running out of questions. I keep going backwards. I don't know if I've missed any, but if I've missed a question, just type it in again, and I'll try to get it. I'm trying to scroll backwards as the questions go by pretty quickly. When Graham's talking about Dan Masters' electrical book, it's a good book. I mentioned that already, so.
There's another question.
What does that say?
You disappeared.
Oh, it's about the molasses.
Hmm.
Yeah. Friend swears by mixing molasses and water. He said it smells kind of funky after a while, but it still works. Yeah, OSPO is supposed to be really good. Yeah, Chris, I don't think I can get OSPO up here. OSPO has been around for a while, and I've seen guys use it, but I don't think I can get it up here across the border for some reason. Yeah. Yeah, and I know you're a Southern polyurethane guy. That product's worked out really well for you. I know they are probably the preferred brand of epoxy primer that's on the market right now. Again, some of the brands that you guys have down in the U.S. are a little bit more difficult to get here. A lot of the companies won't even ship them across the border. I do have a U.S. mailbox that I can actually go down and pick it up, but some products are a little bit more difficult to get for us than others. But the SPI is a good product for sure. Yeah, we hate the environment. Yeah, careful, Chris. We're live. Okay, what else, guys? I'm running out of questions. We still have 47 people watching, so I'll continue this until we run out of questions. I think we may cut it. Well, we're already 2 hours and 10 minutes into this chat, so.
And 3 beers.
And 3 beers. So we may have to cut it off when the beers run out. How many more beers do you have?
1 more in the fridge. I have to restock soon.
The name of the electrical book is the Dan Masters. I wish I could, let me see if I can get it really quickly here. It's right there in my TR6 file. It's a yellow book, no, underneath the, yeah, keep going, right there. Yeah, thank you. So yeah, I brought a bunch of stuff out for reference if I had really technical questions to answer, and somebody asked me about books that I use, so I have some books over there, but can you see this? Oh, it's the Dan Masters Triumph TR250 TR6 Electrical Maintenance Handbook. That's what it looks like.
Is it weird?
It's got wiring diagrams in the back as well. Big fold-out wiring diagrams that are great. So it's a really great book and really dumbed down for guys like me. So I really suggest that. You're probably going to...
Wiring diagrams, they were colored wiring diagrams into...
Yeah, the AAW site that Keith was talking about earlier, if you go on the AAW site, they have colored diagrams as well that you can
No,
download.
I forgot the name of the website
Thanks,
that
John.
I use.
See ya.
Really forgot the name of the website that I use, but it is colored wire diagrams and they are perfect.
Yep. Okay, guys, any more questions? So I guess I have one question for you guys. Is this session valuable? Something like doing like this every now and then? Is this something you'd like to see in the future, or is this going to be a one-time thing? I'm not sure from a quality perspective how the video and the sound is coming through. Probably give me some feedback on that if you could, and we'll decide if we want to do another one in the future, and we'll encourage you guys to think up some more questions for us that we can hopefully answer for you. I think we've done pretty well as far as answering most of the questions on here. And of course, if there is a question, you can always get a hold of me either on my channel or Elin's channel. You can always leave a comment on a video, and we're generally pretty good at responding.
I have a question that keeps popping up on my channel. I was surprised that nobody asked it here, but normally on my channel it keeps popping up, and it is like when I fix something, when I weld something, when I do something that is like rebuild something, they keep telling me that you know that you can buy that new and it's not that expensive, right? So I always respond to that the same answer, and I stopped even responding to that anymore, but the same answer I have is this is our hobby. We do that because we love it, because we like it. It's not because we have to do it or because we're gonna make money on it. We know that our labor is going to down the drain, you know, it's not, it's never going to be paid off, but it is our hobby, we enjoy it, and it's like I always give this example to people. If you tell to the guy that goes fishing every week on the weekend, you know what, you don't need to be on the river or on the lake for 6 hours. You can go and buy the fish from the store, right? You don't need to invest in this equipment, fishing rods and stuff. You can just go and buy the fish from the store. Will they go? No, they will still go and fish on the river or on the lake. And it's the same for us. We like to rebuild things. I know that it's not cost efficient sometimes, but it is because we love what we're doing. So this is the answer to this question that many people ask. But obviously the people here are the ones who are really passionate about triumphs, and they don't ask stupid questions.
So yeah, so I've had a couple of comments about volume, and just so you know, I did invest in a microphone, an actual desktop microphone that we were playing around with for the last couple hours before this video went live. It was kind of a short notice. It was a couple of days notice basically, and so I sort of perused Amazon and bought a microphone that I thought would work, and apparently it doesn't. So we're going to have to look at alternatives for either miking both of us up. It's a little difficult on an iPad to actually get us both mic'd up.
Yeah.
So I was looking at the possibility of doing a sort of boom style mic between the two of us. That didn't work out, so I invested some money that seems to be wasted. But anyway, we'll figure out getting a little bit better audio for the next session if we decide to do one, and it sounds like we probably will in the distant future, who knows. When we figure that there's one needed, or when we get some requests to do one, we'll do another session. But anyway, I guess we can end it here. So I'm just going to thank everybody that tuned in. I'm not sure what the peak viewership was, probably around 60 or so.
64
at one time, 64. So it's not too bad. Anyway, we've had a good time doing it. It's something we wanted to do for the last little while, and I'm glad we had the opportunity to finally do it. So yeah, so thanks everybody for watching and commenting. And thanks obviously for subscribing and watching our channels. That's the big thing. I'm going to say this because I never say it on my videos, but if you haven't subscribed to my channel or to Elin's channel, make sure you subscribe and hit the notification bell. That's a big help for both of us. I know in my analytics, for example, the people that watch my videos, about 53% of the people that watch my videos are not even subscribed to my channel. So yeah, if you enjoy the content, make sure you subscribe, make sure you hit the notification bell so you get notified when we post videos. So that's my public service announcement basically, and I don't think I've ever said that before, but I'll sort of try to push it.
Yeah, me too. Like, and sharing is a big thing because if you like a video and you're sharing in your favorite media, or whatever it is, Facebook or Instagram or whatever, you help us because he just refuses to monetize his videos just because he wants to play music in the background. But my videos are monetized, and I'm getting a little bit like some peanuts, but I'm getting some revenue of my videos. That's why you see an ad every 5 minutes. I'm sorry about that. You're like free to use your skip buttons so you can skip the ad, but that brings a little bit of revenue and helps for developing this channel. I'm really hoping that one day I'm gonna be able to do a video a week. Like I normally try to do that, but sometimes I skip 2-3 weeks. Sometimes I skip 52 weeks like last summer. But
so I think the next video we'll probably do, and Elin's probably going to be agreeable to this. I haven't asked him, but I think we have an engine build coming up. I have an engine build coming up in the next little while, so that might be a good opportunity to do some live streaming, just to see us muddle our way through an engine build. It might be over a couple hours one day and a couple hours the next, but that might be of interest to some of the viewers. So to watch us, just play around in the garage and put together an engine. So maybe that will happen within the next month or so. It depends again on how I do on this car, but maybe there's some interest to see a live stream on how to rebuild the engine for the 250. So that's another idea for a live stream that we can talk about in the future. So, okay guys, thanks again very much for watching, and everybody have a good night or good morning depending on where you're from, and thanks again for watching and tuning in.
thank you.
Bye guys.
Bye.
Oh, we have to figure out how to turn this off now. Let's go up here.
I have no idea.
Stop streaming.